Let's rock.
Hello, everybody. What is up? Good morning, good morning, good morning. We are on a Murder Church, episode 75. Holy shit. Which means that I have changed the Phil Spector thumbnail. Let's play the bells. Let's go ahead and start this thing out correctly. Appreciate everyone coming through here this morning. And yes, it already in the chat there. Happy Mother's Day. I've actually also got to go see my mother today. I got to get her something too. Don't tell her that I didn't get her nothing until right now, but yeah, hung out with Dan yesterday. Got to see the doggies. Got to see Gigi and Baby. I was posting some stuff on the old X machine. But yes, good morning. Oasis Cat, welcome in here. Brooklyn, welcome in here. Bless you, Father. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Brooklyn. Coming in here. Semi Sharp in the house. Wildside going to Dutch Bros this morning. I'm not sure what that is. I've heard of that, but I'm not sure what Dutch Bros is. Morning, Debbie, also coming through here early. Like to see it. Yeah, we're, like I said, going into today. We're looking at James Pex, who is returning. We've seen him once before. Blood spatter expert James Pex is recalled to the stand. We're going to start out with him this morning for about an hour. Yeah, we'll see how many more stragglers we get through here this morning before I make any more announcements for stuff that may be coming up. But yeah, let's jump in here. Thanks everyone for hanging out. Get the sound here. Rocking and rolling.
Thank you. The defendant's present with his counsel. The district attorneys are present. The jurors and alternates are not present. I thought they were in the box. Yes? Do we have something to do without the jurors?
Certainly we do.
I think we do, Your Honor. Okay.
Sure. Mr. Dixon and I have chatted about this. Your Honor, I have a witness that we've got on an on-call status at the moment.
Okay.
Her name is Dr. Mary Goldenson, and it's spelled Goldenson.
Factual lie. Welcome in.
It is as follows, that we understand.
I don't remember if I like this guy or not. I remember the name,
A few months period.
but I don't remember if he had a shady vibe or not. In this trial, there's a lot of folks that I personally think have a very shady vibe, and there feels like something that's maybe potentially going on the Phil Spector side of things.
Up to you. You don't have to listen to my words. And there's actually a report and email that
Some shares this morning. Miss Tina coming through with the share Seeking Justice and Factual Law, who's in the chat. Thank you.
Taking off Mrs. Clarkson's computer and between the two of them, it tells the story of what's going on.
Tries to spread the word a little bit. Bonnie Bailey going to come through. What's up, Bonnie? Hope you're doing good. Always love to see Bonnie.
Okay, I've read the email as well as the report.
Yes, Your Honor. Basically what it is that we are seeking to call Dr. Goldenson, and as you can see, for a very, very limited purpose. We don't intend to get into any privileged matters because there was no privileged matter. She never saw Dr. Goldenson. Dr. Goldenson never consulted her. Apparently what happened is the breakdown was that there had not been an approval of health insurance by SAG at that point, so therefore I've spoken with Dr. Goldenson, and she said that after they had this one phone conversation, she never heard back from her again.
Are you saying the phone conversation is not privileged?
I don't believe it is to make an appointment.
Well, there's more than just an appointment. There's some discussion there.
Well, yeah, I don't think that is.
It's the purpose for consulting her.
Yeah, I don't think.
I understand.
Already starting mine no morning off with Rosen over here.
I don't think it is privileged. I don't think it is.
He doesn't actually have an argument. He just keeps saying he doesn't think it is instead of giving an argument.
Comes to you and says, I want to hire you.
Yes.
And says, I committed a robbery. How much do you charge? And you give him your very high fee. And
There's a lot of people like that.
And the client says,
You had to say that, huh?
The client says, I can't afford that. Thanks. I'll go.
I've never heard that.
I'll find somebody else. The conversation with you when they were in the process of hiring you, is it not privileged?
I think that would be privileged, yes.
Okay.
That hypothetical, I think, certainly would be, because at the most, it's a confession, at the least it's an admission, so clearly it's
Okay.
privilege. The fact that they decided not to hire me for the reasons given, of course, the privilege still attaches, we know that.
Okay. Well, there's certain language that's contained in your report, which would be Ms. Clarkson saying something to this individual as to why she was talking to her, it seems to me would be privileged.
May I have one moment with Mr. Ford? I had a thought on this.
Okay?
I don't know if it's a good one or a bad one.
Your Honor,
Yes.
the reason I asked for a moment is just to kind of get this ready, is that
Well, there's
Donna
another issue.
Clarkson is here to claim the privilege.
And we'll go from there. The privilege certainly goes beyond the death of the individual. If the person claiming the privilege is the appropriate one, we'll have to find that out.
Her lawyer.
Okay?
He's
Go
a
ahead.
good.
And then we still have the
CH,
issue of the
welcome in.
email, though, which is separate and apart from...
Get in here. Appreciate it.
One argument we could make, Your Honor, is that the email, which clearly is not privileged,
a separate issue.
okay, in order to give meaning to that, you have to follow up with this statement. In other words, she said she intended to do something, and then did she follow up with her intent? It's circumstantial evidence that the email, and it corroborates the email. And the email itself suggests that she wouldn't be going to that person unless she wanted some help with something. So to that extent, the privilege is waived. She's basically telling another person who clearly is not within the confines of the privileged relationship that she's going to be going to this psychologist and so forth, and even gives the reason why she might be going. And the fact that she actually made contact with her corroborates that. And that's certainly not privileged. The fact that she made a phone call, dialed this person's number, had this person's phone number, is the inference can be drawn that she needed some help, even without getting to her statements. So I believe that this is technically not privileged. It's already been in
Dave,
effect waived.
what's up, brother?
We would also just take
your
the
shirt yet,
position
man?
that the privilege doesn't apply under these circumstances. In other words, is the privilege absolute, or is it not absolute? There's arguments that I think could be made either way.
Well,
But
I'm listening for the arguments.
that basically the waiver of the privilege by the email and other evidence that's been presented in this case.
What are the dates of the phone call compared to the date of the email? The email is January 2nd, 1904.
Well, we know the 1904 is incorrect. No, it's right. Yeah, we know it's 2003.
We know it's within the, we believe it's within the 1 year window before she passed away, before Ms. Clark's died, but we're not really
The time
sure.
we've been talking about, 2002.
And I believe that the doctor doesn't have a clear record as to when that date is, but she definitely remembers the contact being made, et cetera, and the reason for the contact being disengaged. And that's pretty much all she says. So
I would also just footnote part of Mr. Ford's argument.
Hopefully everyone had a good weekend, or still having a good
It is a separate issue
weekend.
regarding the email, and I agree. But also, if it's read if the statement
Also.
is read in conjunction with the email, it may very well be that Mr. Ford makes a good point that it may in fact not be privileged because it has been published here in the email in terms of a response here. So
we think we could still call her if the court rules that we can't get into the statement of I need your help type thing. In other words, the hearsay from Ms. Clarkson, then we should still be able to call her and say, was contact made? Yes. Did anything ever come of it? No.
The question is, was contact made if I talk to you, the very fact that I had a conversation with you, even if you don't get into the conversation, I'm asking you, is that or is that not privileged?
our position is that it's not privileged.
Well, give me a
I think-
case. Give me some law.
I think that there's a bright line distinction between actually contacting somebody. It'd be like, using the example you did with me, it's been my experience, in 37 years I've been doing this, where I will get calls. Mr. Rosen, I want to come in and speak to you. Can you set appointment? Sure. I'll put the individual on to my secretary. My secretary will book the appointment, and I may never see the person. This has happened where they just never even show up. Some of them don't even give the courtesy of calling back to cancel the appointment. I don't think that's privileged.
Well, I'm asking you, if you'll give me some law,
Okay.
I will take a look at that, whether the contact itself is privileged. The conversation, I'm very comfortable at assuming that the person
I've
claiming
seen some
the privilege
wildness
is the
from the
appropriate person.
Koberger special so far. Yeah, I have yet to see it. I'd like to watch it on Kick if I can make that happen this week. We'll see though. Yeah, like I said on X, I'm going to be definitely doing some more stuff on that. And straight up, admittedly, farm engagement, like farming the fuck out of that shit. That's literally all these people are doing currently.
That you cannot use a privileged conversation and then say it is corroboration of another email. That argument doesn't wash with me at all.
All right, well, we'll take a look at this more. I'm going to see what we can do to help you out there.
I don't know if we need to get to the privileged area at this point or not.
I
We might be able to do it by stipulation, I don't know. Whether she's the person to claim the privilege.
Well, just whatever, they need to make some representation that she's authorized.
Well, it's not, Mr. Rod.
Well, what's your offer of proof? I think that.
My offer of proof is that Donna Clarkson is the executive of the estate, and she has the privilege and would claim that. She's here with her lawyer to do so.
Okay, maybe y'all want to talk with somebody and see if you
Yes.
can arrive at a stipulation.
Maybe we could break.
Right.
Mr. Pex and I can chat about that, and if it's the fact that we could probably work something else.
Okay, are we ready to go? Can we get the jurors out? You've previously been sworn, you remain under oath. Would you just state your name again for the record?
My name is James Pex, P-E-X.
Thank you. Would you take the stand, please? You may proceed.
Welcome back, Mr. Pex.
Thank you.
The reason we're recalling you is that between the time you left and the time you've returned, we've gotten some records from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department Crime Laboratory that weren't available to you when you first testified. Have you been provided with some additional records to that end?
Yes, I have.
Could you tell the jury what additional records that you've been provided?
I was given
Hey, morning, Bob. What's up, man?
gas-clad lab inspection report dated March 21 of 2006
Okay.
for the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office.
Yeah, I'm interested to
Department of
see it,
Scientific
Dave.
Services Bureau. In
I've
other
been
words,
seeing
the crime
everybody
lab.
talk about it.
Okay, and
One side's
if you
losing
could,
their shit.
Tell the jurors what an
The other side is
report, the
also
lab
losing their
report
shit.
is that, in other words,
For
describe
opposite
what the
reasons.
nature of these documents are.
Oh,
When
no,
a
Sammy, I don't blame you.
laboratory applies for-
You're probably doing it the best route, honestly, because there's a lot of noise out there about it. But
a accreditation. This is a process, and there is an association
Yes,
called
happy
the
Mother's
American
Day.
Society of Crime Laboratory Directors, and they have a laboratory
like I said earlier,
subdivision
I got to go get something from my mom. I got to go visit her today. Me and my brother.
that has suggested techniques and parameters for accreditation. If your laboratory wants to meet these particular standards, then they will come out and inspect your laboratory and see that you have the proper procedures and safety protocols in place. And if you meet their standards, then you have formal recognition by a third party outside the laboratory that you have an accredited facility.
Okay, and so these auditors, would a good analogy be like if an accountant would go audit somebody's financial records and they would create a report regarding that?
Someone from outside the business.
Okay, and so this would be somebody from outside the Sheriff's Department, crime laboratory, or people, a number of people would come in and go through their laboratory and then issue an audit report, is that correct?
That's correct. The process involves looking at the facility itself, whether people have adequate space to work, whether it's a safe place to work, the procedures that are involved, are they recognized and are they validated, and do they provide testimony and are they qualified to provide testimony regarding the tests that they do.
Okay, and so are the crime laboratory's procedures, in order to be ASCLD certified, do they have to be in writing?
Yes, they do.
Okay, and I can't remember your testimony you gave before, but it seems I remember that you had run an ASCLD certified laboratory for a number of years before your retirement. Is that correct?
That's correct. The Oregon State Police Crime Laboratory System was one of the first in the United States to become accredited. We were accredited in 1985, and I worked within the system as a forensic scientist, and then when I went into management, I managed an accredited laboratory, and also as a manager, I conducted internal audits of other laboratories within the system annually.
Okay, so basically a laboratory gets audited, and if you're work for that laboratory, you have to cooperate with the auditors, correct?
Yeah, it's accreditation is a voluntary process. If you want to be recognized as an accredited laboratory, you have to follow their guidelines.
Okay, and in addition to your work with the certification process through ASCLD, you were asked by ASCLD to actually be an auditor to go to other
Jesse,
labs.
thanks for coming through here. It says, hi, fam, and a member for 16 months. Holy cow. Thank you, Jesse. Let me get you with one of these happy anniversaries here. We got a Mother's Day, and we got one of these for you. Hold on. Well, if I can find it. There we go.
Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
Happy
Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
That's coming through okay on y'all side? Is
Happy anniversary.
Happy
Happy
my
anniversary.
earbud that it's fucking it up, or?
I'm telling you like it is, baby.
Did that just cut off?
I'm telling you like it is, baby.
What?
I'm telling you like it is, baby.
What just happened? I wonder, maybe restarting will help that. Things are always freaking weird. That's all I know. Things are always getting weird. I had to restart the computer yesterday, so maybe something got messed up. Yeah, at this point in time in this trial, Brooklyn, Phil Spector was out on bail. Yeah, and then through this trial into the second trial, he was out. Megan Easton, a year. Good morning. A whole year. Wow, that is incredible. Absolutely incredible. Thank you.
Happy anniversary. Happy anniversary.
Love that. It's fucking dope. Wild side in here, hanging out. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Tina, good morning and happy Mother's Day to all the beautiful moms. Pokemon, Shelly coming through here. A lot of fine folks coming through. Appreciate it, guys. Thanks, y'all. I got a few more. I got another share, Oasis Cat. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Yeah, guys. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Yeah, we are. It is Happy Mother's Day to all the fine mamas in the chat. Happy Mother's Day to you, beautiful ladies.
Laboratories to audit their labs, is that correct?
It wasn't through ASCLD. There's two processes. Number one, every 5 years or so, a group of people from outside your facility comes in and spends several days there going through reports and so on. You're also required every year to conduct within your system internal audits. And that's what I did, is I went to other laboratories within our system and assisted in the audit process.
Okay, and using the ASCLD guidelines and so
Using
forth.
the ASCLD guidelines.
And the ASCLD requirements and guidelines and rules of the way that labs are certified, are they the same throughout the United States?
Yes, they are.
So the laboratory here would have to meet the same guidelines your laboratory had to meet, correct?
The accreditation process does not dictate what tests that you necessarily run, but it dictates what you do to validate those tests to ensure that they're accurate.
So you looked at, pursuant to our request since you were last here, you looked at the audit records for the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department Crime Laboratory, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, can a laboratory or laboratory personnel that go to crime scenes, can they get certified in different areas of work? In other words,
Dealing with crime scene processing?
and other things.
Yes, there is a module within ASCLD
Micah?
for certification for crime scene processing.
And
for
what
coming
is
in.
it meant by crime
Shelley's
scene
got coffee for
processing?
all the
If you could
fine
just sort of
folks.
say, explain what the scope of that job or that work is.
Again, it would look, you as an auditor, you would go in and see if they have the proper equipment, if it's conducted in a safe manner. For example, do they have things to put on their shoes? Do they have masks to wear? Gloves? Do they take adequate notes and proper photographs? Do they write reports that reflect the findings that are in their notes? Crime scenes vary considerably, of course, from one to another, so the accreditation for crime scene processing deals more with the more general aspects of it.
Okay. Would it deal with scientific or procedures that are utilized at crime scenes, such as, let's say, luminol testing and things of that nature?
Yes.
Okay.
If not already documented in another section of the laboratory.
Okay. And with reference to the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department crime laboratory as it relates to crime scene processing, were you able to tell from the audit document whether or not they were crime scene certified, sort of by ASCLD?
Objection, Your Honor. I think we have a foundational problem.
What's the foundational
It appears to
problem?
call for hearsay as the question is being asked, the documents in front of the...
Well, but I think that he can interpret documents, and based upon the documents, he can come to a conclusion. I'm going to allow him to testify.
For this accreditation process, which began in 2004, the laboratory chose not to seek accreditation for crime scene processing.
Okay, so it wasn't like they sought accreditation and failed, they just didn't apply for it, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and that was, okay, now with reference to the accreditation that the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department had, were they accredited as of 2003?
Yes.
Okay, and did they go through some type of accreditation review in 2004?
Yes.
And can you tell the members of the jury what that process was in this particular case?
Still waking up over here.
As this document that I have in front of me states,
Shoulder's
there
killing
were
me.
a
It's a little
number of
better
people
today.
on the inspection team. They initially came
This
to...
one has been long, but interesting. It's been very long though. I bet you about the length, but I like the trial. But we're working on it. We're working our way through it. We still got, I would imagine, I'm gonna go ahead and say we're 80% through this thing. So maybe even to 85ish. I don't know. Maybe not. I'm predicting summer sometime towards the end of summer for it to end.
on December 5 through December 10th of 2004.
Get a new one going.
And
New
conducted
cranker.
an extensive investigation of the
New
laboratory.
one cranked up rather.
Some of the findings were appealed to the ASCLD board. In other words, there were some areas that the team found that they may have disagreements on. The board made decisions on the appeals on April 8th of 2005. And then there was some follow-up remediation documentation provided for review on November 27th of 2005 and also March 11th of 2006. So there's a process of discussion that's taking place between the ASCLD accrediting body and their inspectors and the laboratory itself. No additional site visits were required, and a request by the laboratory to maintain and extend their accreditation until April 12, 2006 was granted by the board in January of 2006.
Okay, so their previous accreditation was going to expire, but they asked for an extension during this review process?
Right.
And you said something about remediation. In other words, what does that mean? What's involved in that?
The laboratory may have a differing opinion than some of the members that are of the inspection team. And so they can ask for a review, and it's not uncommon. And then the ASCLD board, the accrediting body, can determine whether or not these issues fit within their criteria or not. They are still the accrediting body. And if the laboratory disagrees and it is what is termed an essential, the whole accreditation process is voluntary. So they could elect to opt out or to conform. They have that choice.
In other words, if the laboratory disagreed, they could either withdraw their request for accreditation, or they could then comply with the requirements of the laboratory accreditation board?
Yes.
Okay, so while this was going on, were some changes made after December of 2004 to eventually come into compliance with the ASCLD requirements?
Yes.
Okay, I want to focus on, and were there approximately over 10 auditors that were involved in this laboratory audit process?
Yes.
Now, does the
The trial itself has been, dude, when it gets spicy, it's pretty interesting. There's been a lot of matches break out, some sparring contests that I have enjoyed. As going this deep, me personally, from what I've seen, I think that Phil Spector did it, just from all the testimony from the ladies that he's been alone with in his life that ended up in the exact same position but didn't die. It seemed to be quite the trend for decades of him being alone with a female, that female wanting to leave his residence, and then him not wanting her to go yet, and he's highly intoxicated, and he brings out a firearm. In this case with Lana Clarkson, it ends up inside of her mouth, and she ends up dead with a bullet through the back of her head. That's where I'm at on that.
Accreditation board, does it have requirements that vary in their degree?
But the jury has been just inundated with so much stuff. Like, I think the real strategy of the defense team in here is just time, just to stretch, get so much information out there, and it gets very confusing. I couldn't imagine being on this jury, quite frankly. 6-month real trial.
Degree or significance?
Yes, they do.
Okay, how does that work?
They have
All the pretty ladies.
a
Happy Mother's
series of
Day.
standardized questions that they have, and I have a copy here with me, that when they conduct
he gets spicy
audit,
now. He'll get in there on 'em.
basically the questions that are asked as they travel around the United States are the same questions. So
Hell
laboratories
yeah.
have,
Yeah, happy Mother's Day to Allie, too. Let her know, Bob. Hell yeah, that's awesome.
there is uniformity
She's going to have a good day, I bet. Huh? Give her that good day.
in the process of the inspection. And there are basically three categories. There are those that are called essential. For example, a safe working environment is an essential. And they have a number of criteria that fall under the category of essential. You have to meet all of those if you want to pass.
So essential would be the more critical requirements, is that
Right,
correct?
be the more critical.
Okay.
They have others that are important, and they have some that fall under the classification of desirable. You do not need to meet all of those in order to pass the inspection. It's just nice if you can.
Okay. With reference to essential requirements, were there some changes from the initial site visit in December of 2004, then eventually...
I can't get over that. I can't get over what we've heard from all of these different women, and it be the same exact situation. I mean, I can't unsee. And, whether them both being highly intoxicated, because the fence is basically trying to say that she killed herself, right? She was suicidal. So in the moment of Phil Spector deciding to pull out a gun like he normally would, and it gets inside of her mouth, she grabs it and pulls the trigger. That's kind of the path that they drive down. Linda Kenny Bodden has been the best defense attorney for him, I believe. She made me question more than anything else, and I do even openly like to do the questioning of could she have possibly done this? Sure. She did seem depressed. Seemed like her life was kind of going sideways. She was getting older. She was getting aged out of her job, which was an actress, which is sad. She was working at a restaurant at this time. But yeah, I can't not think about. And when Phil Spector, first of what to do is immediately after, runs outside and gets to it and talks to his. After the limo driver, his driver, heard a gunshot, he's already standing out, kind of like, what the hell's going on? You see Phil Spector come outside of his mansion holding a gun. I think he was holding a gun. I might have made that part up there. But comes out and says, I think I've killed somebody. Why would you think that?
Were there some changes before the laboratory was eventually accredited later on, a few years later?
Yes, there was.
Okay. And did any of those requirements deal with proficiency testing?
Yes.
Okay. What was that, if you could tell us?
There was one question. Which is 1.4.2.5, which is an essential.
I will say, Megan, that a lot of people go back and watch, I don't know how many people I'll see come through comments of old episodes. I mean, we're a year into this thing now, and I still see people come through that'll kind of get really into the trial, which is wild to me, But it's a lot. Again, episode 75.
Procedures used generally accepted in the field or supported by data gathered and recorded in a scientific manner.
Okay, what was the original finding of the original audit in December of 2004, which was Well, what was the original determination?
The report states the laboratory reports the unqualified identification of human blood based upon the results of 3 tests, which are not specific for human blood.
What is meant by the words not specific for human blood? If you could explain that to the members of the jury.
There are a number of tests that will identify, or we call presumptive, or that are indicative of the presence of blood. A visual examination is one of them. You have a shirt in front of you and it has a red stain on it, it looks like blood. That's a presumptive test. As an examiner, you can't conclude that it is blood at this point. If you want to follow the accreditation plans, you have to perform further tests.
I ain't even mentioned it this morning. Kathy coming through here. Kathy, happy Mother's Day. First of all, Kathy, if you are a mother. You are a mother. You're a mother of Pumpkin. Let's just be real here. Coming through the old Venmo with a 420. I appreciate that. Thanks for streaming this morning. No, thank you for coming through here and showing some support. I really appreciate that. I think we are getting close here to a new wheel. We've been working on this one for about a week now. Where are we at right now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 2 names away, folks, from a wheel. If we can get a wheel in here, we can get a spin going this morning. It'll be, I guess, it'll be for the stickers, the magnet, and the tattoo. I still have a few tattoos left, but if we get through a wheel, we're going to go into a shirt giveaway, and I got a lot of cool merch in there, a lot of cool shirts. So if there's anybody in here that might not has received a shirt, I know a lot of people have gotten a lot of this stuff. But if there's any folks that maybe hasn't gotten any of the shirts, or they see any other shirts that they may want, you can get on there for a very low price, and the possibility could be endless if you get a nice publicly buzzed shirt. A lot of cool ones. Thanks,
Number
everybody. First of all, let me give you a little bit of love. Hold on. Let's see if this works. Hold on now. Y'all can hear that, right? The sound bites are coming through okay?
To confirm the fact that it's blood beyond just a visual exam. And then if you want to identify it as human blood, there are additional tests that need to be performed.
Okay, so if I saw just a spot that looked...
They're good. I'll tell you what, when I'm on a single show like this right here, they're really good. Like, it's fine. Like, this is... I've gotten used to the voice now. Like, my voice sounds different compared to the headphones. First night I wore these with Bob last week, actually, I think. But I will say this. I can't get used to having another guest. I tried it Friday night with Missy, and I just couldn't get used to it. It's like it comes through slightly strange compared to what we're watching, compared to these, where everything's just kind of more, all-encompassing. Like this, these are nice. I like these. And when it's singly me, I'm going to keep rocking them. But I think, to answer your question, I've gotten more used to them. All factual eye going to help us out here. We're one away, baby. Spin the wheel. $5 holler. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Lordy, lordy. I'll tell you right now, you're going to get a party. You're going to get a party.
You got to fight for your right.
The party. Hell yeah. Thank you very much. That's one away from a spin this morning, folks. Thank you. Thank you.
kind of reddish, like the appearance of blood, that wouldn't be a test, that'd just be a visual observation. Is that correct?
Right. It is acceptable in your reports if you only, perform these initial tests, if you put in your report that the
I'm sure there is, but I can't think of
indicative of the presence of blood, or
an example right off the top of my head, but I'm sure there
was positive. It's how you word your report. You can't perform a screening test and then jump to the next level that says, I found blood.
Okay. Could you explain
Teresa,
what this
more
finding
morning.
was
Happy Mother's Day
and what
if you
it
are a
means
mother.
and why the inspectors went to that finding?
Right now I have, I'm just going to show you actually. Hold on, I'm going to bring my entire thing over here. This is my little studio that I look at while I'm doing a live stream. I have currently made 666. Oh my God!
Well, what they found is that, and what they requested in a supplemental finding, they state the biology manual was modified in May 2005
I don't think I've ever seen
require
that.
qualified reporting of the identification of human blood when results are based upon nonspecific tests. Review of 4 case records confirmed compliance with these policies by using the words indicates or presumptive in reports to qualify the results.
I don't even know how I've made 666. The only one that I see that's come through has been factual lie for $5. Where did the other $1.66 come from?
That include the visual identification of blood, both microscopically as well as visually with the naked eye?
Yes.
Okay. And so in 2003, this particular procedure wasn't in place with the reference to the laboratory. Is that correct?
The generalization here does not speak to what the inspectors found, other than they found the identification of blood in some reports based upon screening tests. I don't know which tests.
Before you testified the first time and since, when you got the additional procedures that were the result of this audit, was there any procedure in the biology procedures manual for the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department that validated the identification of blood by looking at the substance through a microscope?
No.
If there is no written procedure for the identification of blood by way of a microscope, then that could never be approved by ASCLD. Is that true?
As far as I know,
that
yes.
makes sense.
Okay. In other words, ASCLD requires a written procedure.
Requires a written procedure, and that procedure also has to be validated.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess that the euro is worth more currently than our money. So yeah, that makes sense. Holy shit. Okay, thanks guys.
Which means you have to have demonstrative proof that you're
getting paid in pounds, baby. Let's go. Let's go. No, that's cool as hell. It makes total sense.
Chemicals are in good condition, that the test is sufficiently sensitive and specific.
Go on,
and
then.
That you have all of this recorded somewhere, and your reagents are dated.
You all right? You all right then?
You have confidence when you do the test that the test will provide you results that it's intended to provide.
Is there any written procedure and validation for the identification of blood through a stereo microscope?
No.
All the money in the world. Even after he died in prison in like 2021 from COVID, he was worth $50 million.
After the original audit was done and that original finding was made, what was the supplemental finding that was made regarding the ASCLD audit that regarding the subject of the identification of blood?
The supplemental finding is what I already read, is that they changed the wording when they use screening tests to indicate or presumptive in the reports.
Okay. Did the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department Crime Laboratory, did they have any written procedure for the specific identification of blood that they submitted to the
You guys see my
ASCLD
pictures yesterday from hanging out on Dan's big deck? I'm going to bring them over just so we can all look at them in their glory together. Here is Gigi. This is Gigi. This is Dan's girl. Whenever she gets mad, and somebody drove through by the house yesterday, one of our friends, and he was just hanging out for a minute, didn't even get out of the car. So Gigi was alerted, and when she is, you can barely tell here, but when I try to get a picture, but when she's really fired up, like all of this hair in the black stands up. Like she reminds me of a hyena, honestly. Like she's hilarious. And then we got the sweet baby. Look at this girl. Look at sweet baby. Look at this girl. Are you kidding me? Look at this girl. She's the boss. She's awesome. She don't take no guff. She'll put Gigi in her place. She'll put everybody in their place. She's like, listen, she's the best.
Auditors.
The auditors would receive a copy of their methods manuals, and those would be the methods that they would be audited.
There we go. Mike is going to finish us off this morning so we can get into t-shirt territory. Thank you so much, Mike. I really appreciate that. Appalachian as fuck. That's what I'm talking about. Hell yeah. And giving out a magic number themselves. The number of the beast, 666. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Let me do a double count just to make sure I'm not crazy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We have got a wheel, and I'm going to get that thing going. Thank you all so much. I'm going to name out the names on the wheel. Tasha, Sinead, Micah. Micah's on there twice. Gabby, Kathy, J Money, Jen, Susan, Carla, Kathy, Factual Eye, and then again rounding out at the end, Micah. A lot of times there's a lot of different folks on this one. I really appreciate that, everybody. Thank you all. I'm going to go and get the new wheel started here, but we have a wheel ready to rock and roll. Thanks to the fine folks in the Buzz Nation. Thank you all so freaking much, dude. Micah, thanks, bro. Thanks. Love it. Morning, Kai. Happy Mother's Day. Looking at the chat here. Yeah, you guys rule, man. Everybody's the best. Let me go ahead and get this going real quick.
And did they have a human hemoglobin assay that they had in their procedures manual?
Yes, they did.
Okay, and describe what that was to
got
the
a
jury.
wheel.
And tell us the difference between what that was and the
You never know.
observation of blood but just by using a
No
microscope.
pumpkins watching.
In the report, there is the next step in terms of the procedures
That would be
that are
funny.
used is a question that
Yeah,
is
she's
asked
got like a
that is
little
also
mohawk
an
that pops
essential.
up when she's mad.
Are new technical procedures scientifically validated before being used in casework, and is validation documented and available for review? If I make up some chemicals to use in a test, have I checked to make sure that those chemicals are properly made and that you get the correct response? Is the precision, the accuracy, specificity, and sensitivity all there? And that's what they're looking for. In their original finding, the laboratory has conducted validation for human hemoglobin assay, so the analysts could use results in conjunction with a human serum assay to identify human blood. This is a test that's the next step up. First, you see something that indicates the presence of blood. Now we're talking about a test that confirms the presence of human blood. The validation of the human hemoglobin assay did test species specificity, so they did do that correctly. This, however, was performed at a dilution of 1 to 126 and was not assessed for cross-reactivity.
Got a wheel, baby. Hell yeah. We'll spin this after this video.
concentrations.
Won't
The
be too
human
long.
serum assay has no documented validation. So they did not keep records of checking to make sure it wouldn't be positive against cats, dogs, horses, and other things.
Hamburger meat, things like that?
Yeah.
Okay, and so that was the only
Hell yeah. Stoked about it.
procedure that was actually in their biological procedures manual, that one that you just described, correct?
There was actually a couple of them that will identify blood that was in their procedures manual.
I'll tighten that bottom base.
Was there,
up, like the
did any of
basis
those
of it
include
is.
looking at what is suspected as being blood under a stereo microscope?
No.
Okay. I want to ask you just in general,
There we go.
when you try
we
to
go.
characterize a blood stain as blood, what are the scientific questions that
Yeah,
you ask
man.
to
Hell
try to
yeah.
go
That- I
through
gotta
the
fight.
process to come to a conclusion whether it's human blood? If you could give me sort of a
Whoa,
general...
Brooklyn. I'm going to give you the Brooklyn soundbite. Hell yeah. Nice.
Brooklyn,
Dude, a $5 bill coming through. Thank you so much. And that's going to start a brand new wheel. And this is the wheel that will be for a t-shirt, guys. And if you guys don't know the merch that's happening on publiclybuzz.com, I will show that off also after this video. Got a lot of really cool shirts. I need to go back in there and start doing a few more. Try to get my brain moving. Get up some cool ideas, but really appreciate that. Thank you, Brooklyn. Thank you.
general idea of what that investigatory process is for a crime scene specialist.
Well, someone who works especially in a biology section of a crime laboratory, of course, sees a lot of garments and materials come through that have red stains on them. The first question you ask is it blood? And then what you want to know, what is the species of origin? You can't always assume that it's human. And how closely can it be associated with a particular individual is the third question that you hope can be answered if you have enough. The first test is
Well,
blood. There are a number of
I think you guys will be able to
techniques that are
read
available.
just
We
fine.
talked last time I was
I'm-
here about a test called luminol.
I'm known for
Another one
having doctor
called
handwriting.
Kaplan-Meier
Let's just say
test, or
that.
phenolphthalein is a term you may have heard. a microscopic exam.
I should have been a doctor.
And there is
But
an
my
old
brain
test
wouldn't
called the
allow that.
benzodine test also. These are all screening tests that, besides your visual exam, help support that
Oh, did I
this
say
probably is
699?
blood. Then you have what
Oh,
are
no.
called confirmation tests.
I don't know. I'm up to 1831 now. I'm not exactly sure. Where are you from, Brooklyn? Are you in Europe too? Are you in the UK?
And we talked about, in the inspection report, one of them. There are actually several
yeah, seriously,
that are
Alden,
available.
thanks.
They are very sensitive tests. One of them
Gypsy
that is
will
utilized
be
called
happy.
Hemotrace is
I just
sensitive
I know she's outside the store. She
to
heard
about
me
1 in
singing about it, but
100,000 dilution. So even on very small quantities of blood,
all that goes
you
to
could
the
determine
gippers,
if
y'all.
it's human
Every bit
hemoglobin.
of it.
Okay, so these confirmatory
Keep
tests
that girl
tell you
fed.
it's human blood, is that correct?
Right,
Now, the screening tests say it's possibly blood, is that correct?
right.
Okay, and that would include the luminol, the phenolphthalein, a visual microscopic exam, or a benzene test, is that correct?
Right.
Now, the microscopic exam, I want to focus on that for a moment, and before I do that, though, I want to get to the issue of DNA. When a DNA test is done, does that confirm that the biological material that might be blood actually comes from a human being?
The DNA test is human specific. The problem is that you can have mixtures. And so you have to be careful, because if you have a mixture with, say, blood and saliva, your blood may not be of human origin, but you may get a DNA result from a saliva that is present there also that is of human origin. So the test only works on human biological fluids, but one has to be cautious because it is a very sensitive test, and it will react with other substances other than blood.
Okay, and so DNA testing, if there's a mixture, you can detect that mixture, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so let me give you sort of
You
a
can detect a mixture if they're both human.
if they're both human. Let's just take a hypothetical. Let's assume that there's some bleeding that occurs, there's a spot of blood, and then there's also some saliva that happened to be on that same area, and they're basically tested for DNA. You could get if it's the same person, you would get one profile, correct?
Yes.
If there's two different people, you would get two different profiles. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. And neither one would give a profile unless it was human blood and human saliva, correct?
That's right.
Okay. So in doing crime laboratory work, if a screening test is done and it turns out to be negative, do you then go through the DNA process if it's a screened negative?
That would be the judgment of the examiner. If you have a stain that you think that the DNA test might be more sensitive than your screening test, then you might pursue going ahead and doing DNA. But you would be extremely cautious of your results because of the potential of a mixture. Because you can only detect the blood, and for example, if the saliva is there and you didn't run any tests for saliva, you might jump to the conclusion that your results come from the blood stain.
Okay. Where in fact
We
you
jump
wouldn't
into
know one way or
conclusions
the
with
other.
this
Right.
man.
When you test for
Pex don't
saliva,
play
is
that.
amylase one
Oh
of
God,
the...
he's out cold, dude. He's falling asleep. Look at that. Going out at your own murder trial. What? That's wild. I couldn't imagine being, even if it is 6 months, even if it is repetitive, I couldn't imagine being on trial for murder and then being that bored that I'm falling asleep. Yeah, getting a little bored.
The detection methods for saliva?
What?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And the screening tests for blood are sensitive for that process, is that correct?
Most of them are.
Like, let's talk about the Kastle-Meyer or phenolphthalein screening test. How sensitive is that? If you could sort of explain to the jury what kind of dilutions one might get and still get a positive result.
In your validation process, when you make up new reagents, and then also part of validation is before you conduct a test, you have to test the reagents against a positive and a negative control. But during the initial process of making the reagents, you will make a series of dilutions of blood to determine how far out this blood can be diluted, and you can still get a positive result. Phenolphthalein tests under optimum conditions could detect blood out as far as a 1 to 100,000 dilution.
Okay. Now, if you see a visible spot that you suspect visually might be blood and you do a phenolphthalein test, should you be able to get a positive result from that?
Normally, yes.
Okay. Phenolphthalein can actually
Get in
detect
here. We're
blood
having a
that's
good morning.
invisible, that's been smeared and not
Happy
even
Mother's
visible. Is
Day.
that correct?
That's possible.
Okay. Now, I want to ask you to look at some exhibits. You were asked, Mr. Pex, to bring with you some pictures of blood that are observed under a microscope. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay, and I want to go through a number of them and ask you to identify the pictures that you were asked to bring and tell us what kind of microscope it was. If we could have this we'd ask that this be marked next in order, Your Honor.
F11.
Is this image here known as a photomicrograph?
Yes, it is.
And tell the jurors what a photograph like this is.
What I did here is I placed some of my blood on a glass slide and just allowed it to dry. I have a regular compound microscope, and the minimum magnification that I have is up 100 times. So what I did, and I have a camera that is on a microscope, and I photographed a portion of that dried blood, magnified 100 times, and that's what it looks like right there.
Okay, so
as it dries, these cracks form as the blood transitions from a liquid to a solid.
Okay.
It looks like Phil Spector coming from the psychedelic era, kind of, he's used to this pattern here now.
You see what appears to be just a reddish, kind of a cracked surface on a slide, a glass slide. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and there's actually light that's coming through the slide, so you get
also good one.
A full view of what's in the...
I will say this, Feral Fridays, From Beyond on Feral Friday did get the chat in more of an uproar than maybe anyone I've showed, which is crazy to me. It's a wild movie, though. It's very wild.
Picture, is that true?
Yes,
Man, it's one of my
the
favorites.
light is transmitted from below.
Okay, do you see more when
Yeah,
you
it does
do
look like
that way
bricks,
than
too.
if you
It's not
took
true
a
crime with thee.
microscope at
Welcome in
100
here.
magnification, you just looked at something that was
Happy
like on a
Mother's Day.
garment?
I've done it both ways. It depends on how thin the stain is. You can make a glass smear of a liquid sample so that your cells are only one layer thick. And with transmitted light, you can see at a higher magnification the cells.
Okay, this would be at 100. You don't see any cell structure at 100 magnification, is
And
that
still
correct?
get your Alan
Not
Jackson
on
fix, right?
a crust like that.
Okay. And what would be the difference of looking at blood like on a microscope slide as opposed to looking at it on a garment? In other words, let's say on a coat or a jacket or something along those lines.
Glass is non-absorbent. That's about the only difference. A garment is normally absorbent, so the blood would absorb into the garment.
Now, if you were
before
to
it
look at
dries.
this same glass slide under a stereo microscope instead of a compound microscope that you use, would you see more or less detail in this particular slide?
It'd be about the same.
Okay.
I've done it both ways.
And you still wouldn't be able to see the cells themselves, is that true?
No, they have, as the liquid fraction, the water has dehydrated, these proteins and the solids within the blood have coalesced into a solid.
Okay. Now, we're going to ask another photograph be marked photograph B. Ask you to take...
From Beyond, I mean, just simply, it's about a doctor that creates a machine that allows the pineal gland, the third eye, to open up to where you can truly see everything around us, and it's depicting as like creatures are around, and it's like so enticing that it's trying to suck you into it, and it also over sexualizes everybody as well. So it is crazy. It's a very wild movie. And then, of course, the one doctor gets totally taken over by this fucking machine, and whatever dimension elements were, happening from said machine, and he dies. The real him dies, but I guess the alternate version of him, which is now part of this machine, is not dead, and the doctor that was his buddy gets taken away, and another doctor wants to recreate the experiment. So it's fun. It's so fun. It's a wild ride.
Take a look at this and ask that it be marked next in order.
What's up, Kaylin? Happy Mother's Day. Brooklyn, happy Mother's Day.
You recognize
This
what
looks like the desert. Now, this looks like the moon or Mars or something. No, I'm going to go with Mars on this.
this photograph purports to be?
Yes.
Can you tell the jurors what that is?
This is an example of where I took a glass slide and spread the blood out so it is very thin.
Okay.
And is basically only 1 or 2 cells thick. And you are looking at that area on the glass slide at 100 magnification in an unstained condition.
Dude, I'm
What's
getting
the
hungry,
difference
too. Here comes the
between when you
food talk.
stain something and you don't stain something as far as looking at something under a microscope?
Well, there are a
gonna
number
get
of
some,
stains that are
Actually, I
available
think I got
that
some
clinical
McDonald's chicken strips.
laboratories
I'll try
and
those,
forensic
yeah.
laboratories have available
McCrispy
for blood.
chicken strips or
In a
something
clinical
it's called. I got
laboratory,
some of those late last
you
night
may
coming
be
back from
interested
Dan's.
in looking at the white cell
Cassie,
fraction. And if a person
still got
has
a
an
couple in the
infection, they
fridge.
may have a certain increase in certain
Seems like
types of
2,000
white cells.
something.
If you stain the slide, you can see all of these characteristics better at higher magnifications. But normally you're looking at 400 to 1,000 power when you're looking at these white cells and red cells.
Okay. In other words, you need a much stronger microscope to look at it at a closer level. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So this would be a smear that would be different than a crust of blood. Like, let's say if there was a stain on my coat here and it was just a crust of blood, a little spot, that would be more like the first photograph. Is that correct?
Yes.
And if it was smeared on my coat, that would be more like this photograph. Is that correct?
The fact that that glass is a non-absorbent surface, I don't think you could reproduce this on a garment.
Okay. Now, are you able to see when it's thinned out, 1 or 2 cells thick, are you able to make out the cell structure at this level of magnification?
Not with certainty.
Okay, and can you, would looking at blood, and you know this is blood because you put your blood on it, correct? Could you look at this and basically make a statement, if you didn't know it was blood, that it was human blood?
Well, what I would do is, if I looked at this, initially I would conclude that it might be blood. It's indicative of blood, and then I would perform a confirmatory test.
Okay. Or DNA testing, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, if you saw this and you tested it with phenolphthalein, what would the conclusion if it was positive or negative? In other words, what would be the information you would
Well,
get?
a visual examination and the use of
I can't believe that was the most shocking one I've shown.
And still the final result
You
is
guys
still
watched
2
the Toxic
screening tests.
Avenger.
Confirmation requires one of the other tests to be performed.
Okay. With reference to blood, I'm going to ask you to look at another photograph. C. Ask you to,
Do you want this marked?
yes, please, 811, please.
Yes.
You recognize what this photomicrograph appears to be?
Yes.
What is it? If you could-
What I have done is taken the original crust that you saw in the first photograph, and I've taken a pair of tweezers and broken it up into a dust-like size. And what you're seeing are particulates of blood in little fragments.
Okay. Can't see the round cells, but you can see the reddish material, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, now the next one, photograph D, next in order, which would be
I-11.
I-11. And what is this photomicrograph, Mr. Pex?
This is just another photograph of the same material in a different area.
Okay.
Yeah, see, this stuff is just so fucking...
I want you to
Jesus.
look at
This is the
next
recall.
photograph.
This guy's already been up. Like, months ago.
Tell me,
Many
when is
months
this a
ago.
photomicrograph
Would you
of?
like this marked?
Yes, next in order, Your Honor.
J11.
This photograph represents a thin coating of paint.
Okay. And what would be the way that you would
You'd almost have to
confirm
be-
whether or not this was blood, even though it looks red?
All professionally
Well, it looks
trained
red,
jury
so
pa-
that
you know,
would lead
the
me
panel,
to
the
perform
jury
a
panel should
screening
only
test,
be professional scientists.
such as phenolphthalein.
Because what the
And
fuck,
if that
dude?
test was negative,
Like, I
I would
understand
probably
experts are
stop
supposed
at
to
that
explain
point.
this stuff, but
I may, if I want to
again,
know what
it's
the
so much
substance is,
information
I
over
may,
such a long period of time.
Go to some elemental methods that would tell me. if
Imagine
it's
somebody
pain.
not taking notes during this trial.
When you say
Like a juror?
elemental methods, are there things that look like blood that turn out not to be blood that are routinely encountered?
Sure.
Okay, so it'd be like a mass spectrometer where you're trying to figure out what kind of paint and what kind of chemicals are in the paint?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the next in order, Your Honor.
K11.
Do you recognize what's in this micrograph?
Yes, this is I took a tomato and took a thin slice of the skin of a tomato and placed it on the slide and allowed it to dry and photographed it.
Okay. All the photographs here were at 100 magnification, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. In your years of experience, Mr. Pex, is it possible to visually identify a substance as blood at 100 magnification with a microscope?
Judge,
I never have.
Judge Stahart,
Not for
just send me to jail.
legal purposes.
Jail would be better than
You can
this.
suspect it's blood, but you have to do
I call it
further
purgatory.
That's correct.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Pex. I have nothing further.
Thank you. Cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Pex, you are not a trained histologist either, are you?
Histologist is a person who specializes in tissues. That all depends on the degree of training. I took histology in college, and I certainly viewed a lot of tissues during autopsy.
Sure. Someone who has advanced degrees in the study of histology and the study of organic tissue might have a little bit more experience than, for instance, someone who just took classes in college or and got a degree in something else, correct?
I guess would have more experience in different types of cells.
Okay.
In the identification of red cells, that's pretty common.
Okay. I want to step back, if I could. I want to talk about the ASCLD stuff first, very briefly. I don't want to get bogged down in that. And then I want to talk to you just briefly about the bloodstain pattern stuff. Beginning with your direct examination, you indicated that there were suggested techniques by ASCLD for crime labs across the country, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and those suggested techniques establish certain standards so that crime labs can begin to have some uniformity with regard to standards and protocol that they develop and they engage in, correct?
Yes.
Mr. Pex, this is a voluntary program, correct?
Yes, it is.
And it's been developed by ASCLD, the body that you talked about with Mr. Plord, to establish this uniformity, correct?
Yes.
But if a particular lab, say a lab in New York or a lab in Wisconsin or a lab in Louisiana, happens not to have sought accreditation for whatever reason, there could be a plethora of reasons, but for whatever reason they have not sought accreditation through ASCLD, that doesn't mean that their procedures, their scientific
I remember ASCLD because I
protocol
thought originally when he was up there saying
insufficient or,
ASCLD, I was like,
subordinate to those who have sought accreditation, correct?
What that means is you don't know the answer.
Okay, but in other words, it doesn't necessarily mean that they couldn't perform the same kind of procedures as an ASCLD accredited lab. They just haven't sought accreditation.
it is.
That's
fucking
right. They may perform
No matter how
the
you feel
same
about him, you got to
tests,
respect
but they haven't
his hustle. It's
demonstrated
fucking, jeez.
that those tests are valid.
Okay, and ASCLD doesn't set protocol.
Like he paints a picture about as
They
well as
simply
anybody I've
take
ever
a look
seen.
at your protocol and make a determination whether or not that protocol meets certain standards, correct?
ASCLD is actually, inspection is actually a process.
Okay.
And as I said, an independent body, separate from the laboratory, independent inspectors that come in to determine if what you do fits within the scientific community. They are valid methods, that you have validated those methods, that you work in a safe working environment. There are a lot of qualifications that are outside tests.
Okay.
Whether you have enough space to work, for example.
Sure, sure. for instance, taking Oregon State Police, the lab that you ran for a number of years, the lab that you worked at for a number of years before that, before 1985, would you consider that lab, the Oregon State Police lab that you worked at and ran, to have engaged in scientifically sound protocol?
Yes, we did.
Okay, but then in 1985, you simply got a third-party body, this ASCLD lab certification, to say, hey, we're a third party, we're independent, and bless you, go forward and prosper. You're doing the right stuff, correct?
That's right.
All right. With regard to certain modules, I'm using that word, I don't know another word for it, subcategories, I guess, of ASCLD certification. There might be some categories in safety, there might be some categories in the biology section, there might be some categories in the physical section or the trace section, all of which have a certification process through ASCLD, correct?
Yes.
The module that Mr. Plord asked you about, crime scene processing, that is probably the newest of all of the modules to be adopted by ASCLD, correct?
That's correct.
So until maybe 4 years ago or so, 5 years ago maybe, ASCLD didn't even have a certification process or an accreditation process for crime scene investigations, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And you indicated, I think, to Mr. Plord, that according to the documentation that you have in front of you, the Los Angeles County Crime Lab did not seek accreditation under that particular module, but there could be a number of reasons why.
I have no idea why they did not.
Okay,
Correct.
but that certainly does not mean that their crime scene processing protocol is substandard or subordinate to those who have sought that.
All it means is just not validated by a third party.
Okay. And the audits happen normally every 5 years, is that right?
That's correct.
Oh yeah, I can see that. Well, I mean, they're not dead, but I guess maybe it's getting low. There we go. Always go back to the old trusty headphones.
You indicated that there was a certain review or appeal process that labs can undertake if, for instance, the auditors, the set of auditors come into a particular crime lab, let's say Oregon State Police Crime Lab, and they look at certain procedures or protocol and say, hey, look, your folks haven't taken a, let's say in the biology section, your folks haven't taken a proficiency test recently enough. And so they mark you down on the accreditation score for that. Then you, as the director of that crime lab, might say, hey, wait a minute, time out, folks. There's a different type of procedure that we have in place. Let's review that and see if you guys can take another look at what we do, our protocol, and see if it meets your standards. Right?
Yes.
Okay, in other words, those processes and the processes of trying to maintain a level of uniformity across this country in crime labs across the country is a very fluid and dynamic undertaking, wouldn't you say?
I think the
lasted a
standards
while,
by
though.
the board
They're pretty
are pretty solid. I think that
I'll
the
bring my
inspection
charger down here.
teams, of course, are made up by individuals from other places around the United States, may have varying opinions upon how they think something should be done. If you disagree with that, then you certainly have the right to appeal to another level, to the board, that you feel what you're doing is right, even though this individual may not.
Okay, fair enough. So in other words, reasonable minds can differ about certain specifics on protocol between ASCLD Lab, the accreditation board, and the particular directors of particular labs.
Yes.
Okay.
Mike, thanks for that share. Appreciate that.
You indicated to Mr. Plord that there were 3 degrees of standards, if you will. Those that ASCLD Lab considers, or I should say ASCLD, because that's the broader body, correct?
Yes.
And then ASCLD Lab is a dash lab.
Anything
is
that's
a
like
subordinate
testing you
body
on
to
the
that.
spot, even if I like
Okay.
know it, I'm like
ASCLD
panicking.
Sorry, has 3
And I
degrees.
hate the way, you know,
those
hate
that
when
they
people
deem
hover you
essential,
on a
those
job
they
or something.
deem important,
It's just like,
and those
ah.
they deem desirable, or, yeah, I think the word is desirable, correct?
Yes.
And in your review of the documentation of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department with regard to those that ASCLD deems essential, the Sheriff's Department actually scored a perfect score on that, correct?
Objection Vegas or something?
In the last, the audit that you're reviewing.
Objection Vegas or something?
Well, what time periods did you cover?
2004 to 2006.
Okay, within that period. Now, Mr. Jackson's question, within that time period.
They were.
It's a very
scored
sharp
100%
mustache,
on
Gene.
the areas that were applicable.
All
This
right.
man put some work into that thing.
And then with regard to the
I'm gonna
important
shave that.
areas, I think
Pete.
you have to have an 80% or better, correct?
Yes.
And they scored an 80% or better.
I think we remember
Tonight,
talking
I
about
think
this
they may have
last time
scored
this guy was up.
95 or something.
You can have, ASCLD has some requirements that might not be applicable to laboratories. For example, there may be tests that some laboratories perform and others don't. So the questions that are associated with those, if you don't run those tests, are not applicable.
Okay. And then with regard to desirable, they passed, I think you have to have a 70% or better compliance rate with that, and they passed that too.
Yes.
Okay. So they were in compliance according to ASCLD with all applicable procedures and protocol.
Eventually, yes.
Okay. With regard to the proficiency testing that Mr. Plord asked you about, he asked you a specific quote, to highlight a specific quote, the finding being there were some unqualified results for human blood, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know the actual quote. You have no idea, based on the findings of those auditors, whose reports they were looking at.
No, I do not.
All right. Certainly, there's nothing to suggest that they were Lynn Harold's reports, Dr. Harold's reports that they were looking at.
I have no idea whose reports they were.
And of course, the biology section and the trace section have a multitude of folks working in them in the Los Angeles County Crime Lab, correct?
I would assume that.
Okay. You indicated there's no such thing as a test for, well, actually, you didn't indicate this. Let me see if I can get this right. We learn things in trials all the time, and this is something that just amazed me. It's not as easy to, you can't just like on CSI, take a swab and tap it to a spot of blood and say, oh, voila, that's blood. It just comes up, as blood. It's not quite that easy, is it?
No, that's why I don't watch CSI.
I'm actually
Yo, Brett,
I imagine
morning.
you don't watch Perry
Happy Mother's Day if you are a mother.
Mason either.
Fair enough, fair enough. The fact is that there are certain screening tests for blood, correct?
It does.
And that's all they are. They're screening tests, is that right?
ASCLD.
And then there are some pretty delicate and pretty specific confirmatory
From the northern rings of ASCLD. ASCLD from above. But what is ASCLD?
tests, one or two confirmatory tests that will actually tell you this is blood.
And can tell you this is blood or tell you this is human blood.
Okay, species specific.
Yes.
All right. Now, to do that test,
Oh,
that
goodness.
last confirmatory test, oftentimes if there's a very small stain, you'll use that stain up to make that determination.
Yes.
Okay. And here's the other thing that I learned in this trial. DNA, unlike CSI, DNA will not tell you that something's blood, correct?
That's correct.
We did a DNA sample, and you see that in cop shows all the time. We did a DNA sample, and we've got your blood on the gun or whatever. That is actually somewhat inaccurate, correct?
It may or may not be accurate.
The DNA could come from skin cells, it could come from saliva, you could drop a tear if you think you've just gotten caught, and that'll all come back to your DNA, correct?
It could, yes.
All right. Now, let's change that a little bit. If the stuff you're testing is red, and it's liquid, and it's in a pattern that suggests that there's other blood around, then you can be pretty sure that what
It
you're
ain't
testing
Kool-Aid, you know what
in
I'm
the
saying?
DNA analysis
Makes me pretty
is
sure that
blood,
it's not
correct?
Kool-Aid. Would you agree with that, sir?
You're talking about liquid blood. You said is liquid.
I did. You know what? Let me rephrase that. Maybe I can go.
He's
at this
like,
a
I don't
little
like
bit
the
more,
word liquid.
Succinctly. There are certain
Or did
tests
Dottie just Dottie?
that you indicated to Mr. Plord should be done to make a determination if something is blood or not. Correct?
Yes.
All right, let's go through those very briefly. I think you told Mr. Plord that what you want to first do is look at it.
Yes.
Let's glance down and see, does it look red or is it blue? In other words, make a visual exam, correct?
That's correct.
Then you might want to engage in a screening test like KM or Kessel-Meyer to make a determination as to whether or not that comes out positive, correct?
Yes.
All right. Then you might want to look at it microscopically and identify what you can microscopically on that particular stain, whatever it is that you're looking
Mother's
at.
Day for Becky.
I think I probably would have done it in reverse.
Look at it
Thanks for coming in here this
microscopically.
morning,
Microscopically
Becky.
first, and
Then the
then,
KM test.
and then determine what I'm going to do with the sample.
Okay. Then you might take, if for instance there's a pattern there, you might take a random sampling and do some DNA testing on those random samples and see what that result comes out to be.
That's correct.
All right. If all of that indicates, let's say your visual exam shows in your experience, and you've got a lot of experience looking at blood, if it looks like blood, then you do a microscopic exam, and even on closer inspection, it still looks like blood. There's a pattern that you're looking at that looks like it's a consistent pattern. It all came from one event. Then you engage in the KM testing, and that comes out positive.
Okay.
Then you take some random samples and do a DNA test, and that comes out positive for human tissue, and let's say it comes back to one of the people at the particular scene where the pattern emerged.
I know that feeling.
You as a scientist would be relatively comfortable at that point saying, what I'm looking at is blood.
Yes.
Okay. So as long as, if I understand your testimony correctly, Mr. Pex, as long as you are somewhat careful about taking steps, each step building on the next, and taking the whole complexion of the event, if you will, that you're looking at into consideration, you can, as a scientific professional, come to a conclusion at some point that something is blood or not blood.
That's right. The problem comes is that whatever reports you write have to reflect the tests that you performed. And
Okay.
this is what the problem that ASGLAD had initially.
So for instance, if the reports indicated the word apparent blood,
Yes.
like in someone's handwritten bench notes, if it said reviewed jacket, apparent blood, or reviewed buttons, apparent blood,
Right.
that would be appropriate.
A reviewer would know that you probably ran a screening test and got a positive screening test and didn't go any further.
Okay. You said that under questioning by Mr. Plord that there is no specific ASCLAD approved method for visually identifying blood, correct?
That's correct.
There are certain, well, in the ASCLAD protocol, there is sort of a catch-all, is there not, for scientific procedures, or I should say specific procedures of individuals who have specialized training and talents to employ those talents and training during the process of their crime scene or crime investigation, correct?
All the
It was
mamas.
a really long question,
It
wasn't
was a long question, but I think I can provide a shorter answer than the question.
Good. I'm counting on you.
From the deep future.
The answer
Brit.
is that the certification
Love the
is for the
Australian folk.
laboratory. And individuals may have specialized talents, but they still have to conform, if you want to remain accredited, with the accreditation process. You cannot have certain protocols in the biology section and have different protocols in, like, the trace section. The certification is for the laboratory, not for the sections. And your testing has to be uniform. I guess that wasn't shorter.
It's still shorter than my question. With regard to, let's use an example. You and I spoke out in the hallway just a few minutes ago, and actually you had a fascinating example. If someone, I think you said that you are aware of a crime scene that included a little bit of trace evidence in the backseat of a car or something like this, and someone had to go out and look at what this little tiny thing was. And somebody made a determination that it was a sequin off of a blouse or off of a shirt of some kind, correct?
That's correct.
All right. There's no ASCLAD protocol for visually identifying
From a Mount
sequence.
ASCLAD.
And that's why there is a
The
catch-all
mountain of
in there
ASCLAD.
for unusual circumstances that might come up. As he indicated, I told Mr. Jackson about a coworker's case, and it was a homicide. The victim wore a blouse that had little glittery sequins on them. In examining a vehicle and vacuuming the back seat, he found under the microscope some of these little sequins. And it turns out that manufacturers of these
Yeah, every Australian I've
have
met so far has been super cool.
manufacture them in certain shapes.
I've got
to
a buddy
represent
from
their
another
particular
community,
product.
wrestling,
And so,
that I've,
there's a
I've
learning
kept
process
up with for
you go
years. He's
through here.
on my actual Facebook.
Things
He's
happen that are unique
fucking
that
good
you
dude.
just can't write a protocol or a method for just everything that you do.
Everybody here through the YouTube and
How
True Crime
you
Movement.
approach
Really
it,
cool.
You can, but you cannot include everything.
As long as the protocol in place at a particular lab includes
Oh my
taking
God.
certain precautionary
What's
steps, documenting every step you take, and then engaging in peer review in the lab itself, that is something that ASCLD certainly looks at and encourages, correct?
That's correct.
And it's that kind of cross, I don't know what the word is I'm looking
Ginger
for.
snaps.
Cross-confirmation
Dude, he
peer
does.
review that is
Young AJ.
sort of the hallmark of doing these kinds of tests and this kind of investigation.
Well, there are actually a couple of different peer review processes. One is the technical peer review, where someone else would look at these sequences and agree with you that's what they are. Then there is an administrative peer review where someone will look at your notes and determine whether you have adequately performed sufficient tests for the conclusions that you formed, and that a regular viewer would come to the same conclusions based upon your notes.
And you're aware that the Los Angeles County Crime Lab does in fact employ a technical peer review process before any findings are memorialized in a report.
Yes.
With regard to the last point or points that Mr. Plord was making with you, he put on the overhead a picture of I think it was a photomicrograph of a tomato, a photomicrograph of some paint, and photomicrographs of some blood, your blood, correct?
Yes.
Is there a reason that in your profession you call yourselves bloodstain pattern analysts?
Yes.
Is there a reason that the word pattern is used in there?
Yes.
Could you explain that for us?
In the commission of a crime, various assaults can occur and blood comes to the surface, and blood can be cast through the air. And you've probably heard about this before, but there are basically three categories. One is blood that just falls from the body by gravity, like someone has a bloody nose, for example. We refer to this as low impact or passive blood spatter. It just falls by gravity. Then you have circumstances where someone has a bloody nose, but he's in the middle of a fist fight, and more energy is imparted to the surface of that blood, and you get smaller droplets that are formed that travel through the air. This we refer to as whatever it lands on creates a pattern, and so this would be like a medium velocity impact pattern. In a shooting circumstance, you have, again, increased energies involved. The size of the droplets get even smaller. And again, when
Becky,
these droplets fall on a surface,
she did half of the opening statements.
The appearance of a particular area is referred to as a pattern of blood.
And in your analysis, either field investigations or if you do a lab analysis later of, say, for instance, clothing or garments, you have to take into consideration the overall picture of the crime scene itself. You don't just look at the garment in a vacuum, correct?
That's correct.
And you don't look at one particular spot on the garment in a vacuum either, do you?
No.
As a matter of fact, that would be incompetent for a bloodstain pattern analyst, a field investigator or a lab analyst, to just take one spot and say, I'm going to take that in a vacuum and not consider everything else, correct?
Your question's a little vague, but I will agree with you at this point.
I'm getting used to that after all this time.
Ladies and gentlemen, keep in mind the admonition. We'll be in recess for 15 minutes. Thank you.
All right, we got a wheel spin coming, thanks to the judge here. Taking a brief recess because we're coming back with Pex for another hour. So we're going to keep on having this blood splatter talk. But before we do, hold on. We got a wheel spin. Hear a lawnmower outside. Somebody's mowing, trying to make me look bad. Sons of bitches. On Mother's Day, out here mowing. All right, here we go. Good luck, everyone. The next will be for shirt. This will right here is for tattoo, stickers, and magnet. Murder Church magnet. Good luck, everyone. Oh, that's a really good one after I tightened her up. Who's that orange one? Kathy! Kathy and Pumpkin with the win on Mother's Day. I can already see Pumpkin right there freaking out. Let's go. Hell yeah. Yes, let's go. Talking about it. What?
Son of a bitch! Shit. Hold up. Hold up. Hold up.
Boom. That's what I'm talking about, Kathy. Getting in here. Kathy's one of the craziest supporters, man. She's an absolute G level, I would say. Incredible. Thank you so much, Kathy. Hold on. Let me get you on the wheel here real quick before forget about it. I like to keep them. I like to do them in real time here. Kathy and stickers, tat, and magnet. Hell yes. Congratulations. The next one, ladies and gentlemen, is for a t-shirt. Yeah, let me show off the site real quick for any new folks here that might not know about the really cool merch that we have. Real quick. Hold on. I said I was going to do that. Publiclybuzz.com. Right here. A lot of cool shirts. My favorite one right now is this is Conspiracy shirt. Comes in lots of different colors down here. I need to get this. I keep saying I'm going to get it. I need to actually get it. And then, of course, the Dandy Savage comes in multiple colors as well. And I should have looked at that in person. I was at Dan's yesterday. We've got the F and Oath shirt. If you know, you know. Buzz Nation. Got a little ghosty with someone. Lots of cool shirts. This one, actually, this is Bob's favorite right here. But the next shirt will be for one of these t-shirts. Of course, the awesome design right here, the Unsolved Mysteries play. Lots of cool shirts. And if you do go on the site, click on t-shirts, and a lot more will pop up right here. Gets pretty wild. I got a pretty deep selection in here. But yeah, that is what we are going to be playing for next, folks. On the wheel. Thanks, everyone, for the support. Appreciate it. Let's keep rolling.
Order, court again is the session.
All right, all parties, jurors, alternates, and the witness are present as heretofore. I understand there's a question about the exhibit numbering, and apparently...
and there seems to be some new folks in here. I'm going to do one more plug. Book club. I have a book club every Tuesday night after Murder Church. Usually starts about 9 to 9:30-ish. We are about a quarter of the way through The Stranger Beside Me, a Ted Bundy book by Ann Rule, which is incredibly interesting. I had never read it before. And yeah, everybody from the Buzz Nation gathers in there. I take very detailed notes. We read 2 chapters a week. And yeah, the next one I think I'm going to try to do like a voting thing to see what we read next. But yeah, come in there. Get in the book club. Get in the book club. The way to get in the book club is to member up here, though. Yeah, get in the nation.
F11, and you believe that we had an F11?
We did, Your Honor, from last
Kathy
week.
and Pumpkin.
It was marked on the afternoon of the 9th, so that means we should have started with G this morning. So everything needs to be adjusted by one letter downward.
Thank you. Just let me make a note. What was F11 then?
Last week, F11 was a 3 letters.
Okay.
What y'all are talking about?
Thank you. All right.
It's true.
So we're now G
Worldwide,
through
baby.
L. Thank you. You may proceed.
Worldwide.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just before we
Hey,
left
Fred,
off,
thanks
Mr.
for hanging
Hecht-
out. Seriously, really appreciate it. And yeah, you're in the future. You've already had Mother's Day. I hope you had a great one.
So I was asking you about whether or not it's appropriate to take the entirety of the pattern into consideration when you begin an analysis as a bloodstain pattern analyst at any crime scene or even back in the lab.
Yes.
And I think you indicated to the jurors that it would be inappropriate to simply look at one or two things in a vacuum. You have to look at everything kind of together in a totality of circumstances, correct?
That's correct.
Now, if you had a situation where, and this is in respect of or with respect to the photograph of the tomato, the photomicrograph of the tomato, the photomicrograph of the paint. If in fact you had a circumstance where there was a shooting, for instance, at a crime scene, and that shooting, just immediately after the shooting, a person emerged holding a gun in his hand, and there was blood at or around the hand of the gun. The person was wearing a jacket. certainly you would take that into consideration if you were to later look at that jacket to make a determination, initial determination of what was happening, correct? And what your investigation revealed.
Objection beyond the scope and also vacant and
Overruled. You may answer.
As a scientist, I use inductive reasoning, and I would take these types of facts under consideration.
All right.
So, not necessarily make judgments upon them.
Sure, but you would certainly consider the circumstances surrounding how you got the jacket. Where did it come from, and where had the jacket been previous to you getting it?
Yes.
For instance, if it had been on a human being just before that human being was seen with a bloody gun in his hand, that might be a consideration if you were to look at, for instance, transfer stains or other stains on the jacket.
Yes, again, one would consider the quality of the information.
Okay.
You would take it under advisement and continue with your physical evidence exam.
And as you continue with the physical evidence exam, if a pattern began to emerge, for instance, if that jacket had a relatively consistent pattern of spatter on the jacket, and the spatter was around a millimeter size or sub-millimeter size in diameter, I guess it would be, and if in fact all of those stains, those millimeter-sized stains were looked at visually, as you said would be proper protocol. They all appeared to be red. They all appeared to be about in the same general size range. Then after the visual examination, all of those stains were examined microscopically, and the microscopic examination was consistent with blood, and the visual examination was consistent with blood. And then random stains in that same pattern, random stains were taken and KM tested, or Kessel-Myers tested, and those all came out positive. The ones that were actually brought up onto the Q-tip were positive.
Excuse me, this is a hypothetical. It's a hypothetical. The strength of the hypothetical
I love it when Judge Dowhart gets frustrated with him as well.
is based upon
With
the facts
Rosa.
of the hypothetical.
It cracks me up,
Thank
dude.
you. And if those KM results came back positive,
Like I feel
and then
seen.
if certain other of those stains in this same pattern were randomly DNA tested, they were cut out and DNA tested, and all of those came back to the victim in the case, victim of a gunshot, certainly as a bloodstained
Yeah, Stan,
pattern
when he's going to
analyst,
see
you would be
Mom.
comfortable saying that the pattern that appears on the jacket, those small red particulate, stains, were consistent with blood rather than, for instance, the third from the left might be a tomato.
Objection taken, incomplete hypothetical.
Overruled.
Difficult question to answer, mainly because every circumstance is slightly different. If I had examined the item and I felt that, as you said, every stain had the same appearance to it, it is not necessary to test every drop of blood within a pattern. And I think that's where Mr. Jackson is going. It is important to test a representative sampling of the pattern. A couple of things need to be considered. One is, do you need to retain some of that for the defense to test? Do you need to retain some of it for demonstration in court? So you do not want to consume all of the sample, so you would test a representative portion of it.
And that, in your mind, would be the proper protocol for making a determination about a pattern of blood that appeared on a particular garment?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Pex. That's all I have.
Thank you. Redirect.
Getting poured on the redirect.
Mr. Pex, I wanted to follow up on a couple of the areas that Mr. Jackson talked about then. First, he was asking you about patterns and whether you test every stain within a pattern. And when you see a spot that looks like blood and you want to test presumptively whether it is or is not blood, there's a particular procedure that you can utilize known as a KM or phenolphthalein test to do that, correct?
That's correct.
And the proper procedure is to take a swab, which is basically, it looks like a Q-tip that's sterile, and you moisten it so that you can touch that stain and draw onto that swab just an infinitesimal amount of that stain, and then do a presumptive test, correct?
That's correct.
That's a very common procedure that criminalists like you have been doing for way before DNA was started, been done for 30, 40, 50 years or more.
That's correct.
Okay, and that's a routine thing that a criminalist does sometimes at a scene, sometimes when a garment is examined. Is that correct?
Yes.
And there's no problem with using up a whole stain to just touch it and draw a little bit on to do this presumptive test. Is that correct?
A portion of a stain, that's right.
Right, but a very small portion of even of a little speck of blood. Is that true?
That's correct.
Okay, and then if you get a positive reaction, then you have a choice. You can go forward and do further testing to see if it's human blood, correct?
Yes.
And you can even do DNA testing. You have that option also. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and if you see a pattern and you get some negative Kastle-Meyer or phenolphthalein test, and you get some positive, and you're doing the test the same way in all these different spots, that tells you that some of those stains may not be blood. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And basically, when you look at a pattern and you look at a garment, you look at the whole picture, but you also consider other stains that may or may not have happened during the incident. Is that correct? Whether they're on the garment or on another garment or on another person, etc. Is that true?
Yes.
And try to see if they fit together or don't fit together, that type of thing. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the phenolphthalein procedure to presumptively tell you whether the stain could be blood is a screening test, and it is approved it is used by laboratories throughout the United States. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And when a laboratory
just
is
fucking
certified
beat
by
these witnesses to
ASCLD,
death,
they have to put, even though it's a common test, they have to put their procedures for
and I think it's the
Kastle-Meyer or
defense's strategy
phenolphthalein
to
testing
stretch
in
it as
their
long as
laboratory
possible
manual. Is
to
that
make it
correct?
Yes.
hard for the jury.
And they have to document scientific
I mean,
literature and or in-house
lots of
testing
time
as to
is
how they do
wasted
this
during
test.
this,
Is
but
that
I mean,
correct?
That's correct.
And
I don't
with
know,
reference
man.
to the
It's a lot
Los
of
Angeles
information,
Sheriff's
but some of it,
Department
I
Crime
don't think
Laboratory,
it
they did that.
makes
They
any
had a
freaking sense.
Kastle-Meyer test described with all the validation requirements in compliance with ASCLD. Is that correct?
Yes.
like this
and
argument that's happening.
When you talked about this audit that was done of the Sheriff's Department that started in December of 2005 and then ended years later, and you answered a question as to whether or not there was 100% compliance with the essential requirements, that was at the end of the audit process after changes were made. Is that correct?
Yes.
And when the inspection was done and the audit was done in December of 2005, there was not 100% compliance. Is that true?
That appears that way, yes.
They were deficient in the blood identification procedures and policies as of that time. Is that true?
Yes.
They failed the requirements as of that date. Isn't that true?
It appears that way from the report.
That mistakes the evidence. There's no failure.
Sustained is to the phraseology you're using.
Let me ask you this. When an audit is done, it's led by a person from ASCLD, or there's somebody that coordinates the audit. Is that correct?
Yes.
In this particular case, do you know who that was?
Mr. Glenn Johnson was the team captain from Texas Department of Public Safety in Austin, Texas.
Okay, and who decides who the audit team was? Is there somebody at ASCLD that's like the director or the person in charge?
Yes, Mr. Ralph Keaton.
Okay, and who is he? What was his
He
position?
is the executive director of ASCLD Lab.
Okay, and he was then, he is now. Is that correct?
Yes.
You've known him for a number of years, I take it.
I know him, I guess, through conversations and communications.
Okay, and Mr. Keaton, did you inquire of him as to whether the ASCLD requirements were the same today as they were back when this audit was done, as well as back in 2003?
Yes, I called him.
Okay, tell us about that.
I had copies.
Appear to call for hearsay with no exception.
Sustained.
Let me give it a fix. I don't, but might be a little something going on. Let me give her a fix ski here.
Was it your understanding that, well, let me ask you this question, Mr. Pex. I'm going to read you a criteria, an ASCLD criteria, and ask if I'm correct, did I read it correctly? And this is a criterion 1.4.2.5.
The question hasn't been read yet. I think we know what the question's going to be. It's going to call for hearsay.
Hold on, this just cracked me up. It was I didn't expect it. It just kept escalating. Hold on, it's a very short. It's a 15-second video. Hold on. I'm just gonna disappear. Phil Spector. Hold on. What the hell's happening, bro? Pouring fucking Jack wildly. Burgers cooked the fuck up, pulling it straight off the grill, right into his mouth, bro. Sweating like a motherfucker, and then just chugging Jack. What is happening? Good God, God. It says, my man's going through some shit right now. I would recommend just leaving him the fuck alone.
Well, I don't know that at this point,
Bro.
so I'll allow him to read the question. I don't know
my
what
God,
the
that
question
was
is going
too
to be
much.
once the criteria is read.
So this question was going to be, did I read it correctly?
Well,
I think we would all assume, I'll stipulate that Mr. Plurk can read it correctly.
it's foundational as to this being a requirement of the audit.
Are you familiar with this particular criteria?
Yes, I am.
All right.
Okay,
Proceed.
was this particular criteria part of the audit
Why,
process that
D?
you've been testifying about?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to read the
And why is he
the
filming
audit
it? Fella
criteria,
needs to calm her
and then I'm
down.
going to ask you a question
All
as
right.
to whether or not it was
Too
met or
much.
not met in a particular circumstances.
Damn, my algorithm is
Procedures used
insane.
generally accepted in the field or
Like, it
supported
really
by
is.
data gathered and recorded in a scientific manner. That's one of the criteria that is essential for a laboratory procedure. Is that correct?
It is essential for the laboratory to comply with if they want to pass the inspection.
Did the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department Crime Laboratory have a procedure that met this criteria for the microscopic examination of a crust of blood at 100 or less magnification?
Not in any manual.
That assumes facts, not evidence, that it's required at that level of magnification.
Well, I don't know that the question calls for it required. He's asking if they had something that matched it. This witness can testify from his review whether he believes they do or they do not, and we'll go from there.
I guess my problem is that question assumes that that's what the protocol requires.
No,
The
it
protocol doesn't require that.
It doesn't assume anything. It's just a question.
Okay.
At this point, if it has no bearing, we'll find out sooner or later. Go
Okay.
ahead. You may overrule. You may proceed.
Do you understand? Remember the
There's
question?
no way.
The manuals that I
Like, it
reviewed
looked hot, like,
did not
ugh.
have a procedure for the identification
Dude,
of
the
blood
straight
based
jack is
upon a microscopic exam.
And I want to draw back to the ADSCLAD accreditation
question.
process and the procedures
That
for a
did just sort
laboratory to
it out,
become
didn't it?
accredited. Is it absolutely, positively
gonna
required
use
that
every
any
emoji I have.
procedure, in order to meet ASCLAD certification, must be in writing and must be in the policy and procedure manual?
Yes and no. If it is a commonly performed procedure and has scientific validation and validation within the laboratory, it needs to be in the procedures manual. There are unusual circumstances that occur sometimes that you cannot write a policy or a procedure for.
Okay, for example, Mr. Jackson talked about this little piece of
Sorry, Mr.
sequence
Jackson.
from a dress, and typically a crime laboratory wouldn't have a policy and procedure how to evaluate that, correct?
That's correct.
Because that's an unusual or novel evaluation of an unusual item of evidence, is that correct?
Yes.
And so there's I think he used the word catch-all to kind of take care of those situations just like you had an example of, correct?
Yes.
Now, the identification of blood is not a novel or uncommon procedure. In fact, it's probably one of the most routine procedures that one encounters in a crime laboratory, correct?
That's correct.
So one, according to the ASCLAD requirements, that unusual or catch-all procedure would have no application to the identification of blood, correct?
That is my opinion.
Yeah, okay. And with reference to the identification of blood with a crust of blood, the same criteria I just asked you about, in your opinion, Mr. Pex, and based upon your years of experience, is there any scientific validity to the identification of blood by way of a stereo microscope at 100 or less magnification?
Well, we're talking about a blood crust here.
Blood crust?
And no, I have never seen anything in the literature that supports an identification of blood based upon an examination with a stereo microscope.
And ASCLD, if you have a new procedure that's not in the scientific literature, not documented, not published, they have specific criteria for a procedure if you want to use that procedure. Is that correct?
Yes.
What is that criteria?
If you have a procedure, the ASCLD doesn't determine what procedures you run. ASCLD is a process. In that process is validation. If you have a new procedure that you want to run, then you need to validate it. Validate its accuracy, precision, sensitivity, and specificity to ensure that test gets the expected results.
Is there anything in the crime laboratory biological identification of blood policies and procedures and protocols that meets that criteria that ASCLD has for blood identification using a microscope at 100 or less
I didn't see one.
Okay, and in order for it to meet that, it would have to be in the policies and procedures.
That's correct.
And if somebody said that ASCLD approved it based upon a verbal or oral description, that would be untrue. Is that correct?
I don't know what the conversation took place, so I couldn't answer that.
If ASCLD approves of a procedure that is not in the policy and procedure manual, they would state that in their audit. Is that correct?
I would expect them to.
And there's nothing about a procedure for the identification of a crust of blood with a microscope at 100 power or less in the ASCLD audit as being approved. Is that correct?
That's correct.
There's nothing in the ASCLD audit that goes through every procedure in the entire laboratory from A to Z that even talks about that procedure, whether it's approved or not. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, the words that are used to describe the test and the test results have to comport or have to match the scientific validity of the test itself. Is that correct?
Yes.
In other words, if I did a presumptive blood test, a Kastle-Meyer phenolphthalein test, and it came out positive, if I made the statement that that was in fact blood, whether it's human or not, I couldn't make that statement. Is that correct?
That's correct.
It's just presumptive. Is that true?
That's right. It's indicative of blood.
Okay. And even if it looked like blood.
That's correct.
Now, you have to take into consideration when you look at a garment, not only what the relevant event that is being analyzed was. In other words, if there's a scene that has to be considered, you have to also know or try to know about the history of the garment. Is that correct?
Yes.
Somebody just put it on after it was laundered. That would be different than if somebody wore it on for a period of time. In other words, if the garment was being worn for a day or two or whatever the case may be.
That you may or may not have that information,
Right.
but it would be nice to know.
Right. Like if somebody went to dinner and then something happened later in the evening, you'd like to know, what was the person wearing that garment at dinner and things of that nature, correct?
Sure.
Okay. Now, Mr. Jackson asked you about the pattern and testing certain things and then not testing everything, that, there are other considerations that have to take into account. And you agreed with essentially his hypothetical. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. And his hypothetical focused upon a pattern or a number of spots, and you test a few of them, and then you get a presumptive positive, and then you maybe do some DNA testing on some of them, and basically you don't test each and every spot. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. What if you add to that hypothetical a situation where you have a bunch of stains, and some of them are Kastle-Meyer positive and some are Kastle-Meyer negative? How does that change the hypothetical question that Mr. Jackson asked of you?
Those that are Kastle-Meyer negative would not be considered to be blood. You found an exclusionary test.
Why is that, Mr. Pex?
If it is indeed blood, then there is an expectation, if your reagents are working properly, that it would be Kastle-Meyer positive. There are rare circumstances that it might not be. For example, I can recall a blood in an arson situation that had gone through a fire. and it basically been baked onto the wall. We certainly had a belief that it was blood, but all the tests that we tried to perform upon it were negative.
Okay. So adding that negative Kasselmeyer to that hypothetical really changes the conclusion, is that correct?
It certainly raises doubt. You need to document carefully in your report what you find.
Mr. Jackson was talking to you a lot about patterns and things of that nature, and talking about a bloodletting event or a crime, alleged crime, and so forth, and whether something was all related or not. And I want to follow up on that a little bit, Mr. Pex. I want you to assume somebody was wearing a garment that had a pattern of potential blood spatter and or impact spatter and or satellite spatter on it. And you would want to consider all the stains that were on the garment as to whether or not they were in fact blood or not. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you would want to consider the person that was alleged to be wearing this particular garment. Is that correct? His height and how big the garment was, etc.
It depends on relevance.
Okay. In other words, if there was an allegation that there was some interaction between this person and another person, you'd want to know that.
Again, it depends on the relevance.
Okay. And you'd want to know, relative to where the blood came from or may have come from, you'd want to know whether the garment was...
Oh, shit. To the Cash App machine. Hey, Anna, that tweet you just made cracked me the fuck up. This shit was crazy. Hey, Anna, thank you so much. She just now sent $5 and says it's for some brewskis. And you know what? That's what I'm going to spend that on. I'm going to get me a fucking nice-ass brew. Thank you very much, Anna. Let me give you a little bit of love. Yeah, thank you very much. And thanks for all the support. Always hanging out. One of the real ones. Been around forever, too. Hanging and banging. Hanging and banging, baby.
Was worn in a way that the pattern was available.
She wants a shirt. That's what she wants.
To be spattered upon.
Got a bunch of sweet shirts. That Savage shirt would look
Just
good
like
on you.
the
I guarantee you that.
hypothetical that you are giving me, we consider hypotheticals in the evaluation of a bloodstain pattern or the reconstruction of a crime scene.
I want to ask you to consider all the facts of Mr. Jackson's hypothetical, this pattern that he described, in addition to the positive and negative testing of blood using the Kasselmeyer test, and ask you this question. Hypothetically, if I hypothetically had a
Afton,
someone's
thanks for the
mouth,
share.
and
Sure, a lot more shares coming through here. After Micah, I think I called out Micah for the share. Missy Mayhem gave one. Lexi the Law Nerd. Shelly gave one. And yeah, Afton, thanks everyone for all the shares this morning.
it was fired, and the person that was shot was the person that emanated the pattern. Would be impossible for a blood spatter to end up on the back of the elbow. Is that correct? Under that statement of facts. Is that correct?
It would seem unlikely.
That's because the area is unavailable to the person holding the weapon. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You have been doing blood testing for a number of years, and you've done it in a very systematic and routine way. Is that correct?
Yes.
And in a scientifically reliable way. Do you believe that?
Well, I would hope so.
Okay. And you not only consider the identification of blood, whether it could be blood by the presumptive test and the confirmatory test, you've actually done the DNA work too. Is that true?
Yes.
So you know it from beginning to end. You actually have conducted DNA tests, and you started doing DNA testing back when it was in the early days, so to speak.
And that's the methods that I were taught are not much in use anymore.
Okay, and basically the methods have improved, and the sensitivity of the DNA testing has improved significantly since the days when you started as
Yes, it has.
Okay. And,
Seems to be working.
Is it correct, Mr. Pex, that you
The
can
psychos,
do DNA testing on extremely minute biological material now that you couldn't get a result on years ago?
That's correct.
Okay, and you can now,
Oh my God.
when you have very minute stains, you're
I
able
hear
to get
something.
results.
Is that
and
on the
determine
video or
whether
is it my
there's a
phone?
mixture of one or more people, or a
Yes.
mixture of two or more people.
What is
correct?
happening?
Okay, whereas years ago you couldn't do that either. Is that true?
It took a larger sample in order to get results years ago.
Okay. Now, when you do your evaluation work as a criminalist, you don't look at just one item or garment, if there's a scene to consider.
Okay,
and try
I
to
think I'm hearing it too. I usually don't hear it. It's what's weird. I'm going to fix it anyways. Let's see what we can do here.
determine what happened. Isn't that correct?
If that fixes
Well,
it.
yes, you have to keep
It
in
is,
mind
yeah. That's
depends
what I
on
was
your
looking
role
at,
in
see
the
if my phone was doing
laboratory.
something,
You
but
may
I
be
don't see
asked,
nothing, but something's got to be going
to
on.
examine a single garment for a specific test. Or you may be in a circumstance where you are asked to evaluate the crime scene and the information that's on the garment and how it relates to the crime scene. Not everyone is.
Nice.
If a garment is being considered as being part of an alleged crime, you'd want to consider
Hearing it crazy again.
other
Ooh, my
items or other, particularly blood items,
Maybe it
that
is my
are
phone.
also alleged to be involved in that crime. Is that correct?
Yes.
How about
Okay.
now? Is it
So
good
if you
now?
have two people involved in an incident and you're trying to determine, let's say, who was holding a gun, you'd want to know not only who had blood on them, but who had more blood, who had less blood, where the blood was, whether the blood was in a pattern, whether it was had a direction to it, things of that nature. Is that true?
That's true, including the absence of what you would expect.
Okay. Now, if there is a bloodletting event where you know that
Bloodletting.
blood is being shed,
Sounds terrible.
then the absence of blood at a particular location may have extreme significance. Is that true, Mr. Pex?
That's correct.
Okay. I want to ask you this hypothetical. I want you to
Check
assume
on Phil,
that
dude. He's passing
somebody
out earlier.
is shot with a gun. Assume that there is blood that comes out of the, and that assume further that it's an inside the mouth gunshot wound, and assume that blood is emitted from the mouth as a result of that there was no exit wound. Assume that fact also. You would want to know where that blood went and where it didn't go. Is that true?
Yes.
If it went on the gun, if there was some spatters on the gun, that would tell you that blood came out of that, from that gunshot wound, essentially. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And if there was no blood on somebody's sleeve, that would be important information to consider too.
Yes, it would.
Because just because there's an absence of blood, you know that there's actually blood flowing from that wound. Isn't that true?
That's correct.
Okay. I want to show you exhibit Y to the 6th. Showing you this photograph, and I'm going to ask you to assume that this photograph is of the decedent, Lana Clarkson. And if you could take a look at that, what looks like a tadpole. I've used that word. I think I've heard people refer to it as tadpole. Does that have a meaning in the field of blood spatter?
Yes, it's...
What's a tadpole?
Yeah, that's a common term that we use to describe the shape of blood spatter when it strikes a surface at a long angle.
Okay, so it gives you an idea as to what direction the blood spatter was coming from when it hit an object.
Actually, if it's a fixed surface like this desktop, you can measure the length of the stain and the width of the stain and determine the angle at which it strikes this solid surface. Those of us who have been doing this a long time can make approximations just based upon, looking at it visually.
Okay. Now, when an item is on clothing that can bunch up and so forth, does that make it more complicated to determine where it originated from and how it came about?
Yes.
Okay, but in this particular instance, the little dot, which would be, would that indicate that the blood came in the direction that the little dot is pointing?
Well, the blood would have originated opposite.
Oh, what's up?
Where the little...
Alenila? That name is crazy. Awesome name, though. Welcome the hell in here.
Dot is located.
I'm sure I butchered that.
Here's the little dot, and opposite, in other words, in
would come from this direction.
I'm gonna call you Leo.
Upwards, according to this photograph.
From the lower left towards the upper right.
In the angle where the dot and that little line is, the tadpole.
Right.
Okay. And how do you know that as a blood pattern or blood, a person that goes to scenes? And
Blood doesn't go around corners. It travels, when it travels through the air.
Hey, you don't know that.
It travels normally in a straight line.
So it looks
So
like
you could draw a straight line through the length of that droplet.
Blood doesn't travel
and you would
around
have an
corners.
idea of the
That's
direction from which it
That's
originated.
an amazing quote.
Okay, and I take it that there's been some scientific experimental validation of this principle that the larger elongated stain and then the dot, that's the way it works.
I know that's the way it works.
Okay, so the blood drop hits, this is called a spatter, is that correct?
Yes.
And it elongates and then a little tiny bit goes further than the elongated portion, is that true?
Yes.
Okay. How does that happen? In other words, what are the dynamics involved in that?
Blood that travels through the air has some momentum, and I have observed high-speed photography of this phenomena. And when blood comes through the air and strikes a surface like this, you kind of have a wave that goes through, and a little bit comes off of the end and makes that little dot.
Okay. I want to ask you another hypothetical question. I want you to assume that this particular blood drop pattern of this tadpole, as we call it, on exhibit 6Y, or Y to the 6th, I want you to assume that this person was holding a gun in the fashion that I am demonstrating to you. I'll go right up to you. Some way like this, oriented like this, with the gun pointed in the mouth. Is that blood pattern consistent with the person holding the gun in that fashion?
I would assume from that photograph that represents the left hand. Is that correct?
Assume that that's the left hand.
And then if the spatter is across like this, we know the origin in the case that you're describing would be from the mouth. That blood travels in a straight line, that it would travel across the hand like that.
Exactly as it's shown in that photograph, is that correct?
It could, yes.
Now, let me ask you another hypothetical. Assume the same scenario where somebody is shot in the mouth, but their hands are up like that. Would that particular blood pattern be consistent with the hands being held up like that?
No.
Why not? What's wrong with that?
It would be the same as dropping some blood on this table. You would form a nice round circle. Just because your hands are vertical and it emanates out this way and strikes your hand, it would make a nice round circle here.
Maybe, let me move
as
though.
opposed to if it goes across your hand this way.
They asked you to look at Defense Exhibit PP.
Interesting.
Okay, this is orientated.
If there was, I'd go get some ice cream.
Up and down.
I don't get any of those around here.
I'm going to ask you to take a look at this. This is a right hand as opposed to the other photograph.
We did.
which
I don't
is a
think
left
I'd
hand.
trust him, to be
Ask you
honest.
to take a look at this little dot here. Does that, as far as visually, is that consistent with what's known as a blood spatter?
Yeah, I keep
You have
hearing
a
it
small
also.
red dot there.
If I can-
It looks like blood, so
But not 100% certain.
it's not certain, but it looks like blood.
Assume further that DNA testing was done and swabs were taken and human DNA was identified. You still can't say with 100% certainty that the human DNA came from blood. Is that
I think I'm
correct?
figuring it out.
Well, that's true.
But basically that would give you some indication of human biological material, and if it was a swab of this stain, that would further help identify that as being more likely blood than not, subject to those limitations.
I'm going to check, John. That assumes facts, not evidence.
What are the facts on evidence?
The entire hypothetical assumes facts, not evidence that that particular stain that Mr. Plord is highlighting was swabbed, DNA tested, etc.
Jamie Lynch
That sounds creepy.
Blood stains
Off the back of the wrists.
back
What
of the
the
hands
hell?
and wrists.
Correct. And that is
And they
on-
were taken through DNA testing.
Thank
Sounds
you.
crazy.
There is a question. You can debate that at a later time or call witnesses back, but I'm going to allow this person to answer the hypothetical. And then the weight to be given to it will depend upon the facts that have been proven to the jury.
Sure.
You may proceed.
Okay. Why doesn't that look like the other stain? What's the difference between the two?
The difference would be that this one that does not appear to be perfectly round, so it wouldn't be like
Yeah,
it fell
okay,
directly
that's what he-
straight down on the surface. If that
Feds are
stain
lurking.
appears and is in its entirety,
Good on that.
it looks like it struck that surface at a very slight angle. So could we go back to the previous one for orientation? And that's the right hand, and that would be right about here on this knuckle. So this surface here, if in your hypothetical you're talking about the origin from the mouth, could be perpendicular to the origin, or very close to that. That's probably somewhere between 80 degree to 90 degree angled stain.
Okay. In other words, would it be consistent with somebody holding an object in this orientation to that particular stain?
Yes.
Okay. So the stain just hit it at a more direct angle as opposed to the other one, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Maybe it was the headphones.
When you want to look at a pattern, well, let me ask you this. Is there any way to look at a stain that, let's say, is on a hand or hands, if there's two hands involved? Is there any way to tell with any degree of certainty whether
start
the
to bring my
same
phone over and
mechanism
start hearing
caused
it there.
staining, let's say, on a garment of another person who
It's
is
usually not
different
that
than
bad. I
the
usually have my
person
phone
that
right here on the
stains are
desk. Now I got to move it over a little.
That's difficult to say. It just depends on the circumstance. When you do pattern interpretation, you have to, for example, Mr. Jackson mentioned the white jacket, and consider there in a homicide that there is a single event potentially that may have created this blood spatter, or there may be more than one event. But if you assume that the blood emanated from the mouth, then the pattern on the jacket is to be considered. The pattern on these hands are to be considered, but not necessarily together. They may or may not be, we know that the source may be the same person, but not necessarily the same incident.
In other words, there may be a time difference between the two. Is that
I
correct?
think
guess
I'm
that's what I'm trying
bugged.
to say, yes.
Okay.
Something is going on. I keep randomly hearing it also. I mean, I don't know what it could be. It's usually not this bad. Like, my phone's pretty far away from my computer now. I'm going to put it in my pocket. Let's get some cloth between it. But when I'm muted, when I mute the trial, it's stopped. It's not happening now.
Now, when you look at
trying to fix
blood
that.
stains and blood patterns, in addition to evidence, is photography, how does it play a role in the looking at blood patterns, just the
What the hell
visual
is going
patterns?
on? The ghost cows are out.
Obviously, the most important assessment
What?
is
That's even
your
crazier.
own visual assessment at the crime scene. Before anything is changed, the position of
Think?
the deceased is changed, and then you document, and that's part of accreditation is documenting what you see, and you do that
Everything's all right.
most efficiently through quality photography.
Okay.
God.
So,
What
if
did these
somebody
dentists do
was
to
in
me?
charge of a crime scene and they were the criminalist,
Maybe.
such as you've done this how many times?
Lots.
Okay. You've been to scenes where people have done self-inflicted wounds as well as homicide scenes? Is that?
Yes.
Okay. And you document what you see in notes and so forth, and you observe things, and then you photograph it as a follow-up. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And Mr. Pex, the criminalist, there's usually a criminalist that is in charge of a particular scene. You understand how that works, I take it. Is that correct?
Normally, yes.
Okay. In this case,
Dude, I think it's in the video.
I think there's testimony that a Mr. Red...
Like, I've never had it to where when I didn't, like when I mute the video, that shouldn't, like that, I don't understand what's happening. Let me refresh this. 39 to 56, or 3902.
was involved in the scene, and he was the criminalist in
What the
charge.
hell?
There were
I
other
still
people
just-
working with him.
I think it's in the video.
Alongside of him, but
I
he was
swear.
basically the criminalist in charge.
Morning, Tiff.
He would have certain duties and responsibilities, would he not?
Yes.
In order to meet sort of a level
Dude, I
of
think so
care
too,
or
man.
a standard of competency. Isn't that true?
It just varies depending on your experience level and your training.
Okay. Well, one thing would be for him to look at all the blood stains that he could visibly observe. In other words, if there was a blood stain on a item or on a person, to look at those. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. Like look at the ones that were on hands, for example. You'd want to look at that if you were a criminalist, right?
Yes.
And that person was deceased. You'd really want to look at that. Isn't that correct?
In a case in differentiating between a homicide and a suicide, the blood spatter that's on the hand is pivotal information.
Okay.
Oh, no,
And if a criminalist went to a scene and did not
never seen it
even
that
take
bad
note
in one of
any
these
blood
videos from
spatters
this
that were
trial,
on
so
a
I was
hand, that
thinking
would
it
be
was me
below
too.
the standard of care.
I want to put all my stuff back and see. I don't know. See, I'm muted, it stops. I pick this up and it starts. We're in purgatory. This is Phil Spector beyond the grave fucking with us. Phil Spector, you son of a bitch. Leave us alone, you demon from hell. Good God. What is even happening right now? Jesus.
I'm telling you like it is, baby.
Oh, shit. Here we go again.
Your experience, is that true?
That is not what I would do.
Pardon?
I guess my answer is that is less than what I would do or anyone who worked for me.
Okay.
You have to understand and have sufficient training that when it comes to a shooting circumstance, there are certain steps and procedures that you follow. And depending upon the circumstances, if there's a question versus suicide versus homicide, procedures that you need to follow, what's important, what is not important.
And the criminalist would be the person that would make sure that photo documentation is done correctly. Is that correct? The person in charge?
Normally.
All right.
Dude, it's in this video. Like, I'm convinced it's in the video now.
Very good. Those are all the questions I have, Mr. Pex. Thank you very much.
We got 15 minutes left
Thank
of
you.
this.
There's about 5 or 6 points that I want to address with you. It's not looking good.
I got a flight this
Not
afternoon.
looking good, Mr. Pex. I'll try. Let's get right to it. Mr. Plord asked you if there was scientific validity. The word he used was, is there scientific validity to the identification of blood just visually? Taken in a vacuum, just visually. Identifying scientifically whether blood is blood just visually. And I think you answered that you're unaware that there is any protocol or procedure in place for doing just that.
It indicates the presence of blood, and I'm talking about blood on garments and evidence.
All right. Is there scientific validity to the identification of blood if the identification is done visually, and then that is coupled with a microscopic examination, and then that is coupled with a random KM testing,
Tiff, right?
and that is coupled with DNA testing? All of it's taken
That's
into
the
consideration
best way to put
before
it.
the
That's exactly what
specific
it sounds like.
identification of blood.
Objection, vague and incomplete, hypothetical, vague, hypothetical, and also it's vague as to the level of magnification, whether it's at 63 or 300.
There are many parts to this. If you want to go back into that and redirect, I'll allow you. The objection is overruled.
Dude, he's slipping.
Do you
You're
have a
right.
question in mind, Mr. Pex?
Going to be
I think
laying on
you're
the
gonna
floor in
need
a
to
minute.
help me again with it.
Sure, if you couple the visual identification, just on
Ghoul vision.
whatever it is, couple that with microscopic examination, couple that with random KM testing, which comes out positive, and couple that with DNA testing that's done randomly, and that comes back to the victim as human DNA. Is there scientific validity to that procedure?
There is scientific validity if it's within a pattern. We already answered this once.
Yes, we did.
And you don't need to consume every drop of blood within a pattern.
Thank you. Point number 2. See, we're moving through this pretty quick. Thank you for that, Mr. Pex. With regard to KM negative, I want to make sure the jurors are not left with a misimpression. KM, Kessel-Myers test, will not give you a negative as that phrase is actually used. It will simply tell you that something is not positive. Is that correct?
It is possible that you could get a negative Kastle-Meyer and the blood is sufficiently dilute, perhaps, that the test was not sensitive enough to pick it up.
Okay, in other words, there can be false negatives, correct?
I guess based on dilution, yes.
You have to, the first thing is you have to make sure you touch the stain to make a determination as to whether or not it's blood. You have to touch it with the Kastle-Myers, the reagent.
Oh, I think most people would do that appropriately.
Okay, but if you don't, if you just pour Kastle-Myers on a swab and sit here and hold it in the air,
yes,
and it doesn't come back positive, that's not a negative. In other words, it's not telling you there's no blood around, it's telling you didn't touch blood, correct? Do you understand my point?
No.
All right, let me ask it this way. If in fact there was testimony in this case that the blood stain or one of the blood stains was so small that the criminalist actually used a swab and attempted to get as close as he could for fear of consuming the stain onto the swab, and isn't sure he actually even touched the stain,
okay,
but then pulled back out of caution to make sure that the stain was preserved for the defense.
And he got a negative Kastle-Meyer test.
Correct. That could be a false negative, correct?
That could be.
Thank you. With regard to one of the other points, Mr.
Somebody
Fuller
nudge
made,
old Phil.
concerning the
Man's
existence
out
of
cold over there, struggling.
the stain on the back of the sleeve. He used an example. I think he walked up to you and held his arm straight out and said, with the arm in this position, that you would not expect to find a blood stain. If the source of the stain was in front of my hand, you would not expect a stain to appear on the back of the sleeve, correct?
Yes.
But that depends on the position of the arm right after the gunshot, correct?
I guess the emanation of these tiny droplets
Outside telling it like it is.
happens in microseconds. And in fact, it happened so quickly in one case that I had that it was faster than a pistol could eject a cartridge case and put a new cartridge in the chamber.
Right.
So that gives you an example of how fast this stuff travels through the air.
The long and short of it is this portion of the jacket would simply have to be exposed, even for a millisecond, would have to be exposed to the source of the blood, correct?
At the time that you have the shooting event, I doubt that you're going to have enough movement because of the time factor in order to have blood on that part of the arm.
But that,
in the scenario that he described.
All right, and that part of the arm would simply have to be exposed to the source, even for a millisecond, correct?
Well, you're not really asking that question correctly.
Well, let me ask it this way.
It makes it difficult for me to answer it.
At some point, let's see if I can correct my own question.
Okay.
The back of the arm would have to be exposed to the source of the blood.
At the time that the blood was created and traveled through the air.
Actually, at the time that the blood had traveled far enough to get to the jacket.
That all happens within a fraction of a second.
That was my question.
Yeah.
All right.
That's 3.
All right, number 4.
We've lost visual.
I'm going to take this a little bit out of order. Mr. Plord asked you about a stain on the web. We'll call it the web of Lana Clarkson's left hand.
Yes.
Did that look like high velocity impact spatter or medium velocity impact spatter?
It could be either one.
Okay. It was certainly large enough to be medium velocity, correct?
It could be either one.
And that could be from, for instance, if someone, say, had a rag and had blood on the rag and the rag snapped, that could create that medium velocity impact spatter, correct?
He's good, man.
I don't like that analogy. A rag is a very absorptive material.
What if the blood is very wet on the rag?
Had you finished your answer?
No.
Finish your answer first.
Thank you. A rag is a very absorptive material, and handling it and moving it quickly will not necessarily cause blood to be cast from it. You would have to snap it like a whip, for example, in order to get something to come off of it.
But if in fact there was enough blood on the rag, say a copious amount of blood on the rag,
Objection's Vegas to copious.
Overruled.
if there was a copious amount, you understand the word?
I understand. Go ahead.
We're on the same thing.
Yeah.
If there was a copious amount of blood on the rag, in fact, that is one possibility for medium velocity impact spatter, correct?
You would have to saturate the rag to the point that it could no longer absorb any more blood. And then it would drip from that, and it would drip just with the force of gravity unless you're swinging the rag or like I said, snapping it like a whip.
Right, but that portion of the rag would have to be fully absorbed. I'm sorry, would have to be fully saturated.
Yes.
Okay. Not the entire rag, but just a portion of the rag that was fully saturated.
When you're dealing with cloth, it's going, as long as you have an absorptive surface, it will absorb the stain.
All right.
And it will spread out.
Now, the other thing that Mr. Plord asked you about that particular stain was whether or not that's consistent, and I think he did it like this. Is it consistent with this? And he held his hands, palms straight out, arms locked in position, hands completely perpendicular to the ground.
For the record, that's exactly what Mr. Dixon did when he asked Mr.
Objection, Your Honor. The editorializing is unnecessary.
That's an inappropriate comment that is stricken. He is making a comment on what you did with the witness. You can bring that up in argument or any other time. That's not an objection. So I am going to strike your comments from the record, and now you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. What I just did was consistent with what Mr. Plord gave you as an example, correct?
Yes.
And you said that if, in fact, you face the hand perpendicular, I guess like as a backboard from the mouth, that
Perpendicular.
would... Say it again?
Perpendicular.
Thank you. Perpendicular to the source of blood, that would be inconsistent, correct?
Yes.
But once you start angling that hand in different ways, then you'll get that tadpole effect as long as the hand is angled in different
That's
ways. Correct?
The angle, the hand, if
All right,
it's
pick
like
it up a little
this,
bit right here at the end.
and the blood is emanating here.
Dude wants
we
to catch
don't
a flight.
know what this distance
AJ
is.
ain't,
All we know is
I guess,
that the
asking it
hand
correctly.
could
He's
be
getting
in this
mad.
position.
The hand could be all the way down in the lap in that position, correct?
It depends. I'm not that familiar with the scene, and so I really can't answer that question for you, whether that would be consistent in this circumstance or not.
Okay, but certainly,
Mr. Jackson, how much longer do you have to go?
not much. I can finish before lunch, I promise you, Mr. Specs. You'll be a little hungry, but not too much.
You haven't finished before lunch, but if you can finish in a short amount of time, you're fine.
You're right. All right.
Yeah, you're up to 5 here.
All right, here we go. With regard to the dot on the finger that Mr. Plord showed you, and I'm pointing to my right index finger just between my first knuckle and my second knuckle, that dot on the finger.
Yes.
If someone was talking about the back of the hand having a small amount of spatter on it, the back of either hand, and pointing to this area where basically my wrist joint is, that is not the same as the knuckle on the index finger, correct? I mean, we're talking about two different areas. Here is one, and here is another, correct?
They could all be part of the same pattern.
Right. I'm not saying that. I'm not asking that. I'm simply saying if you were to describe that portion of your hand, you wouldn't point to this portion of your hand, correct?
Gee, I guess not.
I guess not. And in fact, Mr. Plord asked you, is that little spot, and by the way, he asked you, and I'm going to step up here with the court's permission.
Yes.
I'm sorry. He asked you, Mr. Pex, if that looked like blood, correct?
Yes.
And he also asked you if that little red stain
bet he hears that in
the
his
other hand
sleep.
looked like blood, correct?
Yes, I believe he put a scenario together.
Right. And you two were
indicate
talking
that was
about
blood.
it in terms of it being blood, correct?
Yes.
All right. with regard to the example that Mr. Plord gave you, and he held his hand like this, and I'm basically, Your Honor, I've got my fingers spread, and I don't know how to describe this, but the same way Mr. Plord was holding his hand, he said if you held your hand like this, that would be consistent with that spot on the finger being perpendicular to the source of blood, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, if I put a gun in my hand, the gun is going to be between, it's going to cover that exact area. If I'm holding the back of the grip of a gun and that gun is facing me and I'm grabbing it like a fist, that gun is going to cover like my hand is, correct? It's going to cover the exact area Mr. Plord is pointing to, isn't it?
If you're holding a gun and pointing away as you described, like I'm pointing with my finger.
No, I'm reversing. Mr. Plord was suggesting that the gun is facing me, and I've got my fingers wrapped around the back of the grip to stabilize it. That gun is going to be in here.
Object, I think this states when I was saying holding the gun with two hands, not saying it was held with a grip or anything else.
He's adding certain things to his demonstration that he's making to the witness.
If
I'm holding the grip like I'm holding this thing.
I can answer your question.
Okay, please.
If you have an object that is between...
He's like, let me catch my flight, dude.
And that area, then blood could not go around corners. That object would obtain the blood spatter. It would not be present there.
All right. And one more question, I'll let you go. If in fact, and I think you talked about this the first time you were here, Mr. Plord brought this subject matter up again now. If in fact, Mr. Pex, as a bloodstain pattern analyst, you have a pattern at a scene, and that pattern, and I think you said that the absence of blood is also something that you take into consideration. Right?
Yes.
If the pattern is confined to an area, a specific area that's just, the blood just simply isn't found anywhere else other than this area, and the pattern on a person seated in this chair, for instance, is consistent with the pattern on a jacket, where would you have to put the jacket if the blood stain pattern found at the entire crime scene is confined to an area about this big, about 2 feet in diameter?
If you know with certainty that your blood spatter is within 2 feet and no further, then your jacket would have to be.
I can totally see that.
If that is the source of the blood on the jacket.
Thank you, Mr. Pex. That's all I have, Judge.
Thank you, Mr. Plord.
Two areas and a few questions, and hopefully get him moving. Mr. Pex, to know something with certainty, proper procedures and testing would have to be done of that area. Is that correct?
That's correct. I haven't done that.
And you've already talked about luminol procedures used by Mr. Renteria, and I'm not going to repeat those, but you've not changed any of your opinions in that regard, correct? Is that true? Okay. Now, with reference to the question by Mr. Jackson, is it possible for somebody to hold a gun and point it in their mouth, place it in their mouth, and hold it in such a way that this particular spec, if we could have this exhibit put back up, somebody to hold a gun where that, assume for purposes of this question that exhibit PP, that the gun is held and it's triggered, let's say with one of the thumbs, right or left, that a blood spatter such as PP could occur?
Yes, it's possible. Held by the left hand with the left thumb on the trigger.
And getting back to the other photograph with the tadpole, that would also be consistent with that orientation. The both of them would be consistent, correct?
Could be, yes.
Final area with reference to this pattern and the testing and so forth, if you test and you get negative Kastle-Meyer testing, phenolphthalein testing of some of the stains, that raises questions as to the pattern and the interpretation. Is that true?
Yes.
Your witness, nothing further.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Nothing.
Subject to recall.
Let's see where we're going next.
That there won't be any. Thank you
we're
very
gonna be
much for
calling
being here.
this for
You're
the
excused at this
day, but
time.
I am interested
Ladies
to
and
see what's
gentlemen,
coming
keep in
next.
mind the admonition will resume at 1:30 this afternoon.
Who's after James Pex? Dr. Michael Bodden comes back. This is Linda's husband, returning to start us off on the next time we come with 46 minutes. Renowned forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Bodden takes the stand. Yeah. I know we have a lot of people in here that are familiar with his wife. Also, she's in this trial as well. Linda, thanks everyone for coming through today. We had a wheel spin, freaking awesome. Kathy and Pumpkin, congratulations. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers. One thing I'm going to pop up on the screen here real quick. Tonight, anybody that might, something that I'm doing weekly now, I'm trying to do on the Wrestle Plunge channel, my second channel, Sunday nights starting at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm watching old wrestling, Memphis wrestling in particular, from 1989. I'm going to go through the entire year. I'm doing 2 episodes per Sunday. Come in there. Let me do just a quick little plug here. Hold on. It's going to take just a second. Boom. Right there. Wrestle Plunge tonight live, ladies and gentlemen. So come in. Check that out tonight. Besides that, you'll see me back here Tuesday night. We'll have another Murder Church, and we'll go right into another book club meeting. Everybody this morning has been absolutely amazing. I appreciate the hell out of it. Thanks for all the support. Gypsy thanks you as well. Again, yes, all the mothers, have a great day. Let's start this week out and kick some ass. Kick this week's ass entirely. Oh, fuck yeah, Tiff. Nice. Tiff. Always some merch lurking and going out. Always trying to work on it. And this next will is for a t-shirt, so I don't think I'm forgetting anything. I don't believe. Everyone, thank y'all so much for your support. I'll see you Sunday. Unless you come by tonight, come hang tonight. I'll get you a link, actually. Hold on. Let me do that. A link for tonight's stream on the second channel. We're having a lot of fun. You can come in. Feel free to make fun of the wrestling as well. Let me get the link here. Here we go. First one did okay. It had like almost 500 views on it. Not too bad. Boom. There it is, folks. Also show it here, what it's going to be looking like here, right here tonight. Actually, I need to change that restream on there, but I'll do that. I'll do that right now. And I need to make it episode 2. I need to do some work on it right now. Everyone, thank you so much for coming in. Love you guys. Let's go. Happy Mother's Day.